We'd like to welcome everyone to the Ojai Unified School District Board meeting. If you'd like to stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, thank you. I don't believe there are any emergency modifications. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. And the minutes, are there any comments on the minutes?
There are no minutes. Because we couldn't turn them around fast enough from last Wednesday to Friday to get them included in the agenda.
That's a big comment.
So they will come in the August.
Next meeting.
Yes.
All right.
Takes a couple of days
Perfect.
usually to pull them together.
Wow. And there's also not a student representative report because it's summer. So good for the students. And we do have a few public comments, and we also have some comments reserved for particular items. So why don't we begin with Thea Wilcox? I know your name. That's why I looked at you.
So with a question mark.
I didn't have a quizzical look all around the room.
I'm speaking now because I might not stay the whole meeting. I have my family at the beach, so I am speaking about Summit and surplusing it. Hi, I'm Thea Wilcox, and I live in Upper Ojai, and I am the president of the Summit Charter School Board, and I'm also a taxpayer and a resident and a mom of 3 school-aged kids. In 2014, voters passed Measure J bond, a $35 million debt taken on by taxpayers to repair and upgrade our aged campuses in Ojai Unified. The district is currently making many improvements worth millions of dollars to schools in the Ojai Valley, which is awesome to see. The last meeting was amazing to see all those things happening. While Summit is not currently open as a public school, it does have students on campus and is used by the neighborhood as a local meeting and play place in the afternoons and the evening. We are asking that the district fulfill their obligation and fix essential capital improvements at Summit. A total of $549,170 was originally allotted for capital improvements at Summit School. It's our only public resource in Upper Ojai. As you know from the breakdown supplied by the district, all the repairs listed are capital in nature and affect the health and the safety of our public property. If you vote to deem Summit property surplus, the district will no longer have to honor the capital improvements that were promised to the residents and taxpayers of Upper Ojai. This seems like a deliberate avoidance of the school district's responsibility and indicative of the attitude that Upper Ojai feels, that the district feels about Summit site. While we don't yet know the future of Summit School, we do know Rocktree Sky will be there next year. There is a community group creating a charter to reopen the school in fall 2020. There are also many people who would like to see its use as a community center expanded. All of these options require our building and property to be in safe working order. I am here tonight to ask you to make the capital improvements that the Upper Ojai taxpayers have paid for and are continuing to pay for. No money from the current Measure J bond has been spent on Summit, and it was passed in 2014 when school was still in session. I would like you to honor your commitment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we, can I respond to
The
that?
item is on the agenda, so I think we could, I was going to save my responses, but it's perfectly fine to respond now.
Well, just in case she is not here.
Right.
I just have I want you to know how amazed I am at all the contributions you make up there and how involved you are up there.
Appreciate that.
And we appreciate that.
Thank you.
But I do know, having sat on this board, that there's not a deliberate exclusion of Summit, that it was 2 years before almost anything was done, because we're quite concerned about spending money on something that, let's say, we paint something and then we re-roof it, or we don't re-roof it, and then it's gonna be a problem. So we were very deliberate in not jumping the gun on items that obviously needed to be done, because we wanted to make sure that the process was not, we weren't doing it in the wrong order.
I hear what you're saying, but given the current schedule of events, that's what it feels like. And for me, going across the street to play in the evenings, which I do quite often, it's obviously in need of essential capital things that have nothing to do with students actually being there. It has to do with safety.
Right. Well, and I am speaking to the board later about it now, I agree that now is the time to address some of those things, but just so you know, it's not a deliberate exclusion.
Thank you for sharing that with me, appreciate it.
Okay. And as a matter of fact, you'll hear me tonight express my concern about that at another property too, so.
Yeah. Go on.
I'll just throw out, I never understood there to be this straight line that you've established between surplusing and the measure J. I mean, I also believe that we should do what's necessary to maintain the capital structure of that school. So I never, and I talked to Trevor because I was curious about it, and he said on the measure, on the 7-Eleven committee that was not a major issue. So I'm surprised that you see the determination of surplus, which, as you know, the 7-Eleven said they thought should occur, including many people from the Summit community, that you saw that as necessarily meaning that we were somehow trying to shirk capital improvements.
So the thing is when it is deemed surplus, you are released of that obligation to spend those funds. And you can decide not to do that more easily if it wasn't in use. And maybe Tiffany can chime in and correct me if I'm wrong. The 7-Eleven committee felt as a whole that voting surplus made sense because the board had no interest in keeping it as a public school. So what other options? For me, I'm saying that's fine if you want to surplus it down the road, but these capital improvements must be made. You can't pass it on, not in good shape. That's my point.
I also have to say that I'm surprised that this is an issue because from my personal perspective, every time the items come up, I've indicated that long-term, I think we want to have a public school there. We just need to have students. And in fact, within the last year, we revisited the Measure J budget. We took a look at all the items and some was included in that revised, I mean, it wasn't a revised, it was just a redo of the, which was fairly recent. And I mean, the reason we haven't talked about it at these meetings is because who's going to do improvements on a property sometimes falls on a lessee. If we're going to lease the project or the school, some of those improvements might be done by the lessee. So it's a determination of
I feel
how
our
that's going to be
taxpayers
done.
Our tax money went to that purpose, and to pass that on even to a lessee, even if it's not me, even if it's Rock Tree Sky, I feel like that is wrong. And that's what I'm speaking to.
And there's more money for other public school students.
But you promised
Well,
that
Thane,
to-
actually,
Yeah.
I want to
Sure.
chime in there. We actually haven't voted on whether it's surplus and whether we'll be leasing or
Right.
selling it,
And that's
right, as
why-
an option.
and that's why
so
we haven't
in the past, I
finalized
think you
this,
had to,
right?
we had the 7-Eleven committee first to it. What if they had advised us to sell the property and use that money for
Exactly.
something
I mean,
else?
that's
So-
the whole point. We didn't have certainty about who was going to be doing what and when.
And I would say the same thing has happened. So our bond managers have not been putting work into both the district office property and Summit property for that same reason. So they were directed not to exclude those from the project list, but simply to not put those on the list until further directed at
Right.
some time.
And
So
I
they've
feel like we've been
on
saying that
hold,
over and
essentially,
over and over again, but
for both properties.
for both properties, right.
Right.
But
Well, I live across the street, so I'm here to say, okay, I'd like to see it.
fair
now.
enough. And that's why we have these meetings. You can say whatever you want, you're more than welcome to, and we will
Wait,
try.
whatever I want.
Absolutely. And we will try to respond the best we can when we can.
Thank you.
Great. All right, Luis Oseguera.
I'm Louise Osagira, and I was on the 7-Eleven committee. And Thea is my daughter, so I live very close to the school too. And even though the committee voted to surplus the property, that does not mean that that meant that property to be privatized. The committee saw that the district had no interest in the property or a public school at that time. The public hearing indicated that the community prefers it to remain a public school, which it was why it was on the recommended list. But there's been no mention of a possible public school in the information presented by your agendas. I haven't seen anything anyway. It is common knowledge there is a group of community members working on a charter to reopen Summit Schools as a public school in the fall of 2020. One of the reasons the committee is so frustrated with the district and wants a charter is that they feel the district does not listen or assist in the education goals of the community. Here is a perfect example. The community came out and spoke up, and here is the Ojai Unified School District not even mentioning the fact that the community really wants the option of a school. Ojai Unified School District is proposing waivers to the surplus procedure. At least that's what I got from reading your paperwork, and it was rather intense. So I'm not sure that I got everything, but as a community member, I do not want a private entity in charge of the public property. That's not right. If improvements or maintenance is needed, the state architectural standards need to be met so that they are not problems when Summit School is reopened as a school. And I mean, I picture that will happen, I hope, in 2020. The community has spoken. There should be support from the district and the board for a public charter school in Upper Ojai. The district cannot abdicate responsibility for Summit School by giving it a private entity lease for the next year. Although I am not knowledgeable in all the ramifications of surplusing, what Ojai Unified School District is seemingly trying to undeniably not take responsibility for the property. Summit needs to remain as public property for perpetuity. I also want to say I'm a landowner, and I would never give my tenant the right to fix the property, or this is nobody's checking on it. People don't do that. Otherwise, what happens? You don't know, and you're the owner, you're responsible, and you're liable. And I don't care what the lease says. I think that's what happens. Anyway, thank you.
I think it's important to say that it was never my intent personally that no one would ever check on it.
Well, that's fine. You know, that's fine to say, but that's not necessarily what happens. The person that is the owner is responsible.
I think it's important to note there's a difference between commercial leasing and leasing of your home, too. Very different. Actually, Cheryl, were you on the 7-Eleven committee? So I'm going to speak here because I hear often from you, from Thea,
Okay.
and basically I hear from two people about what the community said and wanted, and then I read a lot of information about those community meetings that sort of puts you guys in the minority of people in the Upper Ojai believing that a public school is viable up in Upper Ojai.
Jean,
It may
can I
not.
just
Let me
intercept?
finish. Okay. So my understanding that there was a big meeting. I know you were at, that was before the 7-Eleven committee, and there was 42 people there, and 2 people wanted Summit reopened as it was before, and everyone else felt that it wasn't viable because there was 23 students. So I think it's important that I love hearing from you guys, and I know your opinions are valued, but I'm disappointed that we don't hear from other people in the community who had different opinions about what was happening in Upper Ojai. And I think it's important for the board for people who are watching these videos or people who are here to understand that that's not the majority from what I have received as a board member. And I don't know, as I'm just double checking, I'm not asking you to come between us, but just say, is there 2 different views?
The only thing that I can speak to, because I wasn't at the meetings up there, is that the last meeting, there was quite a lot of people that attended the 7-Eleven committee meeting to talk about a public school. The meeting prior to that, there were quite a few in support of Rock Tree Sky. So there is definitely a whole other group that has different interests than opening a public school.
Well, in the neighborhood council in Upper Ojai, shortly after the fire, there was probably, I don't know, maybe 100 people there. And the majority voted to have a public school in Upper Ojai.
But that following spring, we only had 19
But
students
but
enrolled.
wait a minute, nothing happened. The community was devastated. They're still devastated. I mean, there's very few people that have even rebuilt their house.
Okay. It seems to me this discussion is probably better moved to when it's
I
an
would just like
agenda
to
item
correct
on
some,
the
but
thing.
just two things that she said that were incorrect though. The majority of the people at the meeting that were saying, we want a public school, but we don't know if we can make it work. We support Rock Tree Sky being there in the interim. That was what the majority said. The majority said they supported the school, the public school reopening, if we can make it happen, and they also supported Rock Tree Sky using the site and making it good. So I just would like to correct that.
I'm sorry, I do want to, I don't want to get too far away from those comments before I say something, which is, for the months and even since the time that the very, very difficult decision to close Summit was made, periodically you guys come and say mean things. You say that we just don't care, that this school board just has been indifferent. You said indifferent to the needs of the students in Upper Ojai, or things of that nature. And I have to say, it remains one of the most difficult decisions that I ever made, was closing Summit. But from the standpoint of at least for me, I look at resources for a school district, and that's a singular idea. We have a school district, and as you know, because we just recently were accused of brushing under the rug the issues at Matilaha and Miners Oaks. There's this idea, out there. We are really in need of as much resources and as much good PR and help and positivity as possible. And I know that you disagree with our decision, but I would love at some point an acknowledgement that it was not a mean-spirited decision. It was not a decision that just looked to throw people under the bus. It was a decision that was made because we didn't have enough students up there.
Kevin, I'm sorry that your feelings are hurt because I'm criticizing something, or I'm saying how I feel and what I feel is right. That is by no means a reflection on you personally. You're in a political office, so you're going to hear the criticism.
I'm not speaking about my feelings.
I am not going to acknowledge that you did everything, because I stood up here and said, please give me a couple months to get up enrollment. Please give me a program. Please let me do anything. And you did absolutely nothing. And that's true. And you met with me one-on-one. We talked about what I needed to do. I tried to do as much as I could. I was never given anything to do. So I'm not going to acknowledge that.
Well, and I'll just respond.
I acknowledge that you do a good job. You do the best you can.
And I'll
but
just-
I don't think that was a good decision at all.
I'm not asking you to acknowledge it was a good decision. I'm just saying that it was a rational decision. It was a decision that rational people could make under difficult circumstances. And I understand that you disagree with it. And also, I'm not speaking from my personal being hurt. I'm just speaking to.
Well, you said you're saying mean things. I'm
well,
not saying mean things.
the choice of words was maybe poor. But what I'm getting at is that we take this on the chin almost every meeting, and I don't think it's a fair statement of how this occurred. And that's my opinion.
All right, another public comment, and let me make sure I get your name. It's Faith Megan?
Yes,
Okay,
Faith Megan Mulqueen.
Mulqueen.
Yes.
Great.
I didn't write my last name.
No, you did, I just couldn't get
Okay.
all the letters certain. I didn't want to say it wrong. Thank
It's okay.
you.
Thank you. So I'm speaking on behalf of myself and all the children that I know in this community. It's really clear to me, I've kind of just entered the game here. I don't know all the information. But from what I've gathered so far, everyone really cares a lot about the children in this community. You guys are all here on behalf of children, and we are here on behalf of the children, and we all want to come up with a really great win-win situation that benefits everybody involved. And it sounds to me like there was an issue in Summit, and the enrollment was decreased, and I'm sure that that was public knowledge for a very long time before the decision was made to close the school. And so if I'm an educator, I had a preschool in this town for 4 years. It was a nature-based Reggio Emilia-inspired preschool. And it also incorporated social emotional support, and I worked at one of the best schools in Los Angeles with world-renowned educators, and really know a lot about what it takes to create a school and the best approaches and ways that children learn. And if I had been here and I had been noticing that the enrollment was low, I would have really looked at the situation and said, okay, well, what's the problem and what are the solutions and how can we fix it? Because there is a community in Upper Ojai, and they do care deeply about their children and about having a school there. And it sounds like there was a problem and nobody really knew what to do, and then it came down to the wire and a decision was made that seemed to be the best at the time and seemed to be the most logical. But there are those people in the community who feel like they weren't really given an ample opportunity to make a difference, to come up with a solution, and they're asking for that now. And it sounds like it makes sense. You didn't put money into a building, you didn't know what the future held, you didn't know what was going to happen, but now there is a possibility, and there are children there, and there is a solution. And sometimes we don't always know what's going to happen and what the future is going to hold or where anything is going to take us. And so we just do the best we can in the moment. And you guys did the best you could, and Rock Tree Sky came in and they had a solution, and that was a good solution. They came in, they're paying rent, they're making really awesome improvements on the school, but it sounds like there's more improvements that need to be made. And if children, I'm sure we all can agree, if they're anywhere on any property in Ojai that's public, it needs to be safe. And all of these, there's certain requirements for that. And all of us are aware of what those legal requirements are if children are in a space and it's being leased to them. And I'm curious as to what the differences are between residential and commercial leasing and the responsibilities of the owners, because I'm pretty sure that safety is a very big responsibility. And knowing that I had that responsibility when I had children in my home and what those requirements were for me to be licensed, I'm sure that those same requirements apply to Summit School. And all that I hear that's being asked is that the money that is supposed to go into the improvements, go into the improvements. And it's simple. And if that money's already been spent, then you need to find a way to get that money back and to make the improvements that are necessary. And I hear that there's a lot of different feelings and emotions and beliefs going on, but I'm here to speak on behalf of the community, of the children that I work with. I still work with the children. I've had a huge impact in this community. I teach permaculture to children. I'm dedicated to them, and I just want to make sure that they have a safe place to go. And that's what I have to say. So please consider and do what you know in your hearts is best and make the improvements that need to be made. And that's all. Thank you.
I would just like to clarify that the money has been sitting to be spent at Summit. It remains sitting to be spent at Summit. I have every anticipation that it will be spent at Summit. The only question ever has been timing. And a lot of the delay has been because we're having this big discussion about what to do. If we weren't having this discussion about what to do with Summit, we probably already would have spent the money. But as long as the discussion continues, Anyway, all right, thank you. Steve Weed.
For the record, my name is Steve Weed. We now officially live in Oakview, but our kids will be in the district probably until they graduate. What happened to the other guy? Couldn't
Oh,
go for notice.
I
Okay,
just
that's
had a
okay.
little skin procedure today, so I apologize. I apologize for looking even more attractive than usual, or less attractive.
You got a long way to go to look as homely as I do, okay?
Wow.
So it was a bit to break the ice,
There
and I'm
you
going to
go.
do things out of order because we need that. I've been around a little while watching the board and the district function, and I just want to share a personal story now. Some of you know my family and my kids. The oldest one will be a junior next year. He's had a tremendous amount of challenges in schools, which I won't go into. Those of you who know him know the story. Today he completed his final in medical technology at Santa Paula. He passed. He will be in Nordhoff's medical technology program. And those of you who know any of the story, well, you're smiling, so I don't need to say any more. So the object lesson here is persist. Persist. Gibble's had a lot of help, but he has stuck with it. Okay? And I've seen each of you stick with it in different ways. You know, you don't face an easy task yet, but there's reason to persist, and you know those reasons. Given the time, I think what I want to do is just to talk a little bit about the last meeting that I attended, and it was an interesting juxtaposition to what's happening. The issues that we have before us today that are important have to do with property management. And I think it's great that we've had this little breathing time so that Dr. Morris can get her feet on the ground kind of and start to understand these issues. But in the last meeting that I was here, I had an opportunity to see Ms. Griffin talk about her concern about being perceived as not being fair, and to indicate that she would recuse herself if she thought that her judgment was being impaired with regards to Summit. And I don't say that just to laud her, because I know Shelley well enough to kind of realize that that's totally in character with her. But we're implementing a social emotional program in a big way this year. We're talking about other ways to school our kids in terms of interaction and empathy and so forth. And that doesn't happen by telling them to do it. Didn't happen with your kids, did it? What kids need is modeling. And I just want to acknowledge that Shelley's comments were a model for us all. And I see that in lots of little ways with this board. So I don't want you to lose hope, okay? Big stuff going on, people have a right to be concerned, but stay the course, you're fine.
Thank you. I think the remainder of the comments are on particular items. So we'll move forward to 6.1, school performance information.
I think I might move over to the podium so I can see the.
And I'll just give a little introduction while you're doing that. So we presented the dashboard data for the district in December. And since then, we have 2 schools have been identified as being in need of comprehensive support and intervention, so CSI. We've been working on a plan consistent with that identification, really for all schools. And then specifically tonight, we'll talk about what are we doing at those 2 schools.
Great. Okay, so CSI is how we refer to our 2 schools, or the title they got, and it stands for Comprehensive Support and Improvement. The schools in California that receive this title, they only receive the title if they were a Title I school. And you become a Title I school when you have over 40% of your students on free and reduced lunch or foster care or homeless youth. It's important to remember that this title, which we're going into the 1920 school year, but this title comes from the 17-18 school year. So not last year, but actually the year before. This is based on the 2018 spring testing that we took, and then the attendance and suspension data from that year that is now almost 2 years ago.
Cheryl, how many Title I schools do we have in the district?
All of ours are Title I, with the exception in the past of San Antonio, although it now qualifies next year. So now every school will be Title I. So there are 4 indicators that they look at that would potentially qualify you, or just that's how you get your rating, so to speak, and we'll show you those in a second. But they are chronic absenteeism, which is missing 10% of the school year. So there's 180 days in school. So any student that misses 18 days, even if they're excused days, 18 or more days, they then count in our percentage of being chronically absent. Our suspension rate, the way that's calculated, is a percentage. Any student that is suspended one time or gets in-school suspension as well would fall into that percentage. So if a student is having a lot of difficulty and is suspended 5 times, for example, that isn't 5 extra dings as far as the way the ratings go. And then, as usual, we look at mathematics and English language arts. That's always been that way in the past as well. Starting next year, we will also have EL progress, which is English learner progress, but that was not part of the rating back in that 17-18 school year. They didn't have the data at that time. So Miners Oaks and Matilahaw got this title of CSI because they have orange and red indicators. Now, in their case, they're actually all orange except for one red for both of them, and I'll show you that here. So it's interesting because in the past, when we were looking at accountability under the old API score, and I'm sure you guys will remember that, really all that was being judged, so to speak, was language arts and math. The way that you got that calculation was through your language arts and math score. And so certainly that has been the primary focus in our schools, is looking at language arts and math. And it's only until this new accountability system that chronic absenteeism and suspension are given pretty much equal weight. So we now have to shift our attention, which I will say back in 17-18, we really didn't have our eyes focused on that as much as we did starting mid last year, and certainly moving into this year, you'll see the plans to really look at school culture and to make some significant changes. So you'll see, for example, for Miners Oaks, these are referred to as gauges. Chronic absenteeism, ELA, and math all fell in orange, and it's just this one red gauge under suspension rate that caused us to fall into this CSI
Cheryl,
category.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought the way the colors came was based on comparison to the previous year.
Correct.
So if let's say the year before you had 1 student suspended the entire year, and the next year you had 3, you would go to the red.
Correct.
Even out of 100 and something students, you had 3 suspensions, it would show red.
So for example, with Miners Oaks in this year, they only had 3.8% students suspended. So that's 11 students out of 292. It's not a huge percentage, but it had gone up 2.4% from the year before. So think about that year before, they were only at 1.4%, right? So one sort of bad year, right? Extra suspensions. That change, because you're right, it's your status and your change that affects you. Because they went up in the number of suspensions, they fell into that red category. So.
You feel free.
Can we wait till the presentation
Yeah,
is done?
we can wait till the presentation's over. We're fairly informal here at the school board,
Just
but
like a simple question.
let's do, yeah.
I know that Miners Oaks Elementary implemented the toolbox, social emotional support. Was this before or after?
So this is way before. So that's what I'm referring to. This is all back from 17-18. So we've already made some significant changes in the 18-19 school year, and you're going to see that we are really rolling now for 19-20. So, excuse me. So Matilahaw Junior High, you'll see they were in the orange for suspension rate, ELA, and math, and it is just the chronic absenteeism that fell into the red that has now caused them to be in CSI. And again, back in the API score, chronic absenteeism and suspension rate would have never counted as far as being on the lowest performing schools lists.
So can I just say, so the lowest performing schools list is based on the dashboard, not on raw numbers, correct?
It's based on dashboard, so we qualified because we have a combination of orange and red. Had
Okay.
we just had orange, we would have been fine. Oh, I wouldn't say we'd been fine. We have a lot of work to do. We wouldn't have qualified for
Right,
CSI.
but the raw numbers aren't the basis for it, it's the color code.
Colors, right.
And that's only a directional I mean, there's some numbers behind it, but
Yeah.
there's a big component that's made up of directional.
Absolutely. Like you could have a school that has a suspension rate that's higher than ours,
Right.
but because they decrease, they're in orange and we're in red. So
Right.
yes, we talked about that back in December.
Right,
how-
I just wanted to clarify that we're not, if we looked at the raw numbers, we may or may not be a lowest performing school.
Correct.
And chances are we probably aren't.
Correct. I'll show you a
Yeah.
little bit of comparison that I think will shed light
Sure.
to that a little bit. So I wanted to just show you how this can kind of compare as far as other schools. And I just really did a quick look and just found a couple of examples. So this is Miners Oaks. Again, we saw that they're mostly orange with just the red suspension rate. And then you have Elmhurst Elementary down in Ventura. And just simply by being in orange, all their gauges are in orange, they did not qualify for CSI. They did not fall into CSI. And then I think this example is a little more telling. This is Curran Elementary in Oxnard. It's actually a K-8 school. You can see here that their academic scores are both in the red, ELA in the red and math in the red. But because they have chronic absenteeism in the yellow, they didn't fall into that. They didn't have all orange and red. So again, in the old API, the Curran would have fallen under us for sure for having lower academics. But because that chronic absenteeism saved them, sort of, they're not in CSI. So, any questions about that?
So let me make sure that I have this really clear. I'm pretty sure I understood what Thane said, but this is not a measure of where we are in like absolute terms, right? This is not saying your absenteeism is at a bad level or at a good level, or your absenteeism is at a, did I say that? Suspension's bad level or good level. What it's saying is it's going in a bad or good direction.
Well, not exactly, because your status still has to be fairly on the lower end, but certainly your change, this is what we talked about back in December, your change can kick you really into a much worse color.
It's a combination of both. So it's a combination of both your absolute score and your direction.
Yeah. Okay, so this is just another simple comparison. Again, I just wanted to point out Matilaha, again, all in the orange with chronic absenteeism in the red. And then this is a middle school in Oxnard. They have a red, their gauge is red for mathematics, orange for ELA. Their suspension rate is in the yellow. That's sort of what saved them from falling into CSI, and chronic absenteeism is in the orange. So
Does
again,
where the arrow is on the yellow and red indicate the number, like 500 versus 600 versus on the scores? Math and-
no, so there's this grid. I don't think we've ever shown it to you, but there's a grid that helps determine what color you get based on, you're looking, it's sort of like you go like, my status is here and the change is here, and then it determines the color.
I want to say, by the way, this is the simplified version. This is the state got rid of API with the number to come out with this because it's simpler and easier for everyone to understand.
Everybody gets it.
So
yeah, it's
just to
really
point that out for you.
very easy to understand. So, you know, we know we have a lot of work to do. We've been talking about this the last 2 years. I would say in my first year as assistant superintendent 2 years ago, we were really focused on academics. And then we moved into last year, mid-year, really looking at our school culture and making shifts in that direction. Right now, you know, we see that an important goal is engaging parents and community. And this discussion right here, right now, is part of that solution, right? So we're excited about that. You saw last year we changed our LCAP format. Marilyn and I started to have, instead of LCAP meetings, we started to have meetings based on topics to try to engage more families. And now with Tiffany on board, we've had a lot of momentum that we're really excited about with the Engaged Impact series. We hope to bring all the solutions together so that we can work as a team to make these changes in our schools. We're also looking at different tools that we can use to engage parents. We were very excited as a leadership team to get a presentation about Parent Square. Parent Square is a tool that we're going to be implementing starting right away in the fall, where we can do two-way communication with our parents and admin and teachers, with parents and community, and it also has full translation capabilities back and forth. So, you know, we're looking for the most innovative new things that we can bring in order to engage our parents and our community in, again, finding solutions to these
these problems we face.
And I want to point out for Parent Square, the big key to that, because right now we can communicate, but the big key to that is two-way communication. So we can text you and you can text us back in whatever language you want. And you can receive that information, but we also can get information back. And we think that's going to be really key to having our parents engage with us in a meaningful way.
Yep.
Because it'll be easy.
Yeah.
Cheryl, I thought I saw somewhere on that list of the CSI schools, I guess, something that was almost like a headline for each school. Some said performance, some said, I think, suspension, some may have said absenteeism, almost like, why are you on the list?
The low performing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you were looking like an Excel spreadsheet that you downloaded with all the schools.
On the CDE website, the California Department of Education. You know, if it doesn't jump to.
But we can tell you, it's the red, right? In Miners Oaks.
Yeah, but
it's
I could swear it
suspension.
said performance for each of Miners Oaks and Matilda, as
Yeah.
opposed to suspension, as opposed to.
If I'm thinking of
absenteeism.
the same list you're thinking of,
Yeah.
it doesn't say suspension. What it says is that we are CSI because we're a low performing school. There's other CSI because of their grad rate. That applies to high schools. And then there's other schools that are just on general assistance. It means they don't fall deeply into this category like we do, but they are still being kind of watched. And the list had, I don't know, over thousands of schools on it, but only 780 something fell into this CSI category, which is sort of seen as the lowest
Okay,
category.
that's exactly it then.
Yeah.
So I was conflating performance with math and English.
Right.
Right.
Got it.
Okay, so engaging our parents and our community is a huge goal and mission of ours. Let's see, so I want to move in next to school culture. Again, I think that this is where a lot of schools that performed lower than us academically were, again, kind of saved from CSI because they were making big changes in their schools to reduce suspensions and to work on chronic absenteeism. And we really didn't start to begin that work until mid last year. We did start with our roll call campaign at the beginning of the year, so chronic absenteeism was starting to be discussed. We haven't seen the results of that as of yet. We'll see how our 18-19 year was as we get our new dashboard information. But this is a huge push and is going to be a significant shift for our teachers and students this year in 1920. You know, obviously our goal is to train our students how to deal with their social and emotional issues. And we really want to bring in our social and emotional learning curriculum in a strong way. We have now adopted Toolbox, started in Miners Oaks last year. We have now adopted it for every elementary school in the district. And we had already been working on last year the social and emotional learning curriculum at the middle school called Second Step. That will be fully implemented there next year. We are working on restorative justice approaches. We sent a team of site administrator from every school and a teacher or staff member to a 3-day training just in June, and they were excited. We're excited. We are bringing this in full force. We have a lot of additional funding this year through CSI, which actually, you know, as much of a bummer as this is the first time in my experience that when you've been labeled a failing school, you've actually been given a chunk of money to support your school. So that's sort of the silver lining of this. We're getting a good chunk of money that it can only be spent next year, but we're going to use that as well as our Restart grant funding, which is coming from the fact that we have gone through a pretty severe trauma with the fire recently. We're getting funding to support that through counseling services, and we're going to use those extra counselors through that extra funding to really help us jumpstart our restorative justice dialogues. And that through those dialogues, it helps us build community, build empathy, and helps us identify the students who are really struggling, right? So that will help us then go into tier 2 by offering them, a higher level of support, maybe one-on-one counseling or small group counseling. So that's the second bullet there, sort of. And then we also want to start implementing home visits this year. So whether it's a principal or a small team from the school, especially when we see those kids who are chronically absent, we really want to get in there and partner with the families, find out what's going on, and line them up with the right resources so that we can get them back in school.
That's one of the things that I heard come out of the Engage to Impact.
Oh yeah, that's a new bullet.
That's a new one.
I'm glad to see
yeah.
I wanted to,
That's
you know,
why
just-
engaging the community in the plan is useful, right? And that's why we're doing this series and then taking that information and then using that to inform the plan. It's iterative design, right? It's not set, but every time we hear something and go, oh, that would be really useful, that seems like that fits in the work that we're doing, then we can add that. And in this case, we have the resources to do it.
Yeah.
It makes sense. It's something that we should be doing anyways, and so it
And I
fits
heard
well.
from a teacher who just recently in the last year was doing it for a different area and raved about the progress that was made
That's
because of
great.
those home visits.
Really
So
great.
I'm glad to hear that.
Sarah, could you put in, what does it mean, I know that give or take 73% of the Miners Oaks population is deemed socioeconomically disadvantaged. What does that mean?
It means that they qualified for free or reduced lunch.
73%.
Right.
And
Or they were homeless and foster youth.
And just for the in general, for a family of 4, reduced lunch means you make $43,000 or less, as it for a family of 4, and free lunch means you make around $32,000 a year or less.
And I know that historically we haven't always done a fabulous, we've tried really hard to get people to sign up and get those free lunches.
Yes.
And it's been, it hasn't been easy. I know Tiarza Taylor did
Correct.
some work on it.
And we'll be continuing with that
And-
this year.
And I know we're going to have, I love your family fund idea, to increase that.
Yeah.
So there are more ideas on coming in on that. And we might find that the real percentage is even higher.
Right.
It just shows the,
And
this is a task. It's a
the other
difficult
thing
task.
that we're working on, and hopefully we can start it in the fall, is fillable forms through Parent Square, so that parents can fill out their free and reduced lunch straight from a device or a computer, which might help them access getting that information to us in an even bigger way. So.
And then we'll be doing that same campaign, Feed Our Kids, Fund Our Schools, where we have a presentation at every back to school night, and we have people on staff right there to fill out the forms with you. So.
Exactly. Okay, so, and then of course we still want to continue to work on academics. It's very important. We are looking at increasing the access to tools such as technology. We're looking at different funding sources so that we can get to a one-to-one where each student has access to a Chromebook or some sort of device. We really, finding the best curriculum possible is very important. We also had the privilege as leaders to see a presentation on Lever Ed, which is a 4th grade curriculum that's all online. It's had some really exciting results in the San Diego area, correct? And so we brought a couple teachers in to see it as well. I think everybody is super fired up about it. I reached out to every 4th grade teacher to see if they would come to a training, a full day training in the middle of summer, in order to determine whether or not they want to pilot it. And they are all coming because they've heard that it's really exciting and interesting. So we're hoping to see whether or not that kind of curriculum change can help us in the area of mathematics.
And I want to pause and say it's purposeful. So in 4th grade, we're doing fractions and decimals and ratios and times tables and those kinds of things where if you don't get it right in 4th grade, it affects your math learning for the rest of your mathematics career, right?
Correct.
But if you get those things right, you're more likely to be successful in algebra, in physics, in chemistry. So 4th grade is specifically targeted, and it has some 3rd grade modules that we get for free and some 5th grade modules, but 4th grade is really targeted because learning those concepts in 4th grade really determines your success in the future of mathematics.
Correct. So we're also increasing our professional development for principals. Again, really exciting times with the additional funding. I do a lot of the professional development around here. I know that Tiffany will be helping me with that, but in this case, with additional funding, we'll be able to send people to conferences. There are a lot of really great math and literacy conferences out there, so we're looking
And
forward
they're
to
also part of
that.
a network, a principal network?
Correct. All of our principals are attending a principals network through VCOE. It's 6 workshops all around how to build a professional learning community. So we're excited about sending them to that as well. We will continue that trend of professional learning communities, which you guys have heard me talk about quite a bit. And so, our goal there is to really help our teachers understand what it means to identify essential standards. What is the 4 questions you ask are, what do you want students to know? How will you know when they know it? That's a key thing. What does assessment look like? What are you going to do when they don't know it, right? So we want formative assessments. We want assessments that give us information so that we can turn around and intervene right away and give them the tools they need. And then what do you do for the kids who do know it, right? We want to be able to add enrichment for our students who master material a little bit more quickly. So we're going to continue those collaborative team meetings under that concept of a professional learning community. So we're excited about that. And then again, with the additional funding, we're going to be bringing in a large number of personnel to help with interventions in the school day and after the school day, specifically at Miners Oaks and Matilaha, since they qualify for most of the funding that we're receiving. So we're excited about bringing in those new interventions as well. So we're excited. We have some good plans, and again, we don't have the data from last year yet, so we will see how we did from the 18-19 school year with some of the changes that we have already made since the 17-18 school year, which is what this CSI title represents.
Do you know when we plan to get that data?
The dashboard is usually released in November, but we tend to get bits and pieces of it, embargoed information, kind of September, October, so
fall, yeah.
fall.
Cheryl, so last year when this dashboard came out, did we do what we had done in the previous years, was send letters to families from those schools? You know how there was that information where if you would like to request a change in school or some extra support, or, I mean, parents.
That was under No Child Left Behind.
Right, so that was
that's not-
previously when we used to be referred to as PI schools.
Right.
We haven't had to do that since
It's not a
then.
requirement.
I will say, just to make sure people know, those letters always were sent out when they were a PI school, and we never once had anybody ask to change schools. And I will tell you, we already have open transfer, right? We have intra-district transfers, and people have that opportunity all the time when they're signing up in the springtime to choose which school that they want to attend.
And when these things came out, you had a presentation to the board?
Correct.
Discussing those?
In December, we discussed the dashboard in detail.
Okay. So despite the paper's claim that we were brushing it under the carpet, they just missed the meeting and the reports that we had in December?
We talked about our dashboard in detail and talked even back then about our concerns and how we were going to address things.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, from a PR perspective, that it's a shame that the and I don't blame people, because I think it's natural human instinct. You see someone says your school is one of 481 poor performing schools in all of California. Oh my God! And
Right.
People decide to send kids to private schools. People decide to send their kids to other places and decide that Ojai Unified is just not a quality education. And this is no excuse, believe me. And I know there are lots of educators in the room, but I've been talking to a lot of teachers over the last few days, and I'll just say that I still there's a reason I'm a volunteer on the school board, and the reason that I love this school district, and there's a reason my kids all are in this school district. I really believe it's a special district, and I don't think that just abstractly. I think it because Ojai is a special place, and if you are in this community, you are in this world where you can't help but care more and have bigger stake and bigger connections to everything around you. And there is nothing more connected to our society and what we become than public schools. This is it, man. 73% socioeconomically disadvantaged. That's what we all need to do a fabulous job of educating these kids and send them off, all of them, to college, hopefully sometime in the future. But
I always quote Mark Twain, out of public schools comes the greatness of a nation. And so I'm here for that noble cause, and my son goes to Miners Oaks, and he will continue to go to Miners Oaks, and he's getting a great education there. Yeah.
Can I speak for a second?
Sure.
Okay.
And Chuck, I think, wanted to say something.
Okay. I think I'm gonna talk with people behind my back. First of all, I wasn't gonna speak today, but I want to give you guys kudos. All of you that have kids in Ojai Public School, they are amazing. I am a substitute teacher. I taught for 21 years in South Florida. My niece and nephew went to Stoneman Douglas, so that kind of gives you an idea of where I came from. I taught in a Title I school, 4th grade the whole time. Love teaching. I love substituting in this district. Oh my gosh. The kids are like amazing. You are amazing parents. Seriously, when I first came into the district last year, I thought I had like candid camera on me. Like, because I was like, thank you, Miss Engel. Thank you, Miss Engel. Have a good day, Miss Engel. I was like, are you kidding me? So you guys are doing a great job raising great kids. So don't let any of this clutter that, because it still flabbergasts me. I'm also a tutor. I tutor quite a few of your kids. I know one of Mr. Ruff's sons, fabulous young man, along with the rest of you that I've tutored your kids. My only concern as a tutor is I've got kids that are coming to me that are very, very bright. Not my kids that I was tutoring in South Florida, but very bright, that because of the lack of a math textbook, some of these kids are falling through the cracks. I understand we don't teach to the text. I understand we are integrating curriculum, integrating social studies into literature. I get it. I've been an educator. I get it. But for math, it's so important that children have that textbook. When you tell your kids to go on Zern or give them a worksheet, it's not the same. And I just hope that when the conversation comes back around to the elementary school needing a textbook, I hope you guys consider the math textbooks. I've bought textbooks. I've bought all the ones I used in Florida, and I tutor with all my old textbooks that I bought. They're not old, it's Common Core, it's the same thing, but it sets out a map, and it's really important in kindergarten. You start with place value, learning your ones and your tens and your counting beans. Where in 5th grade now you're talking about millions and 100 millions in place value. So it helps your curriculum grow. And there is a huge gap for these kids who are extremely bright. I have an 8th grader I work with, an amazing math brain, never really learned his multiplication or his long division. And now he's embarrassed and he's falling through the cracks. So just the next time that textbook comes up, they're not cheap. Believe me, I've taken the money out of my own pocket. I get it. Put some thought to that, because some kids don't learn on the computer, believe it or not. Or goof around and, yeah, okay, I'm on the computer, whatevers. But I will say that you're working with a base of kids that is amazing. So if you continue to work in that direction, you're going to be successful. I'm just asking consideration for the math textbook.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Engel, will you state your name for the record?
Yes, my name is Lisa Ingle, Ingle.
Chuck, you had a question?
I do. 1718 is what this is based on, right?
Yes.
So is the Thomas Fire calculated on absenteeism? Because
There was-
I know as a grounds person, it was painful to see, and Summit School's an example of how families were broke up, moved on, and that. And I don't know if that's part of the data, because no other county experienced what we did, and that's why I'm wondering, for the black eye that you're talking about, we got a real black eye that year.
We didn't have any loss of days for the days that we were actually closed from school, but if you're saying that families were displaced and then couldn't make it to school, that would have counted against us if they were absent.
Sure, that's my question.
Yeah,
Probably did.
yeah. Any other questions?
I'll just say, and I said this in a letter to the community, but these metrics don't show us, to Kevin's point, what's great about a school. There's all kinds of amazing things happening at both of those schools, at all of our schools. And so, yes, being on this list is unfortunate. Yes, it's a label that we don't want to have. It's only based on 4 pieces of data, not on everything that's happening in the school. So we are going to do our best to move our kids and make sure that all of those 4 metrics are improving. I also want to say, Miners Oaks is a great school, Matilla is a great school, we have great things going on at all of those places. Teachers, staff members who care deeply, try every day, in and out, principals. And so it's hard to hear this, we have work to do, but I feel like we have the right people in place to do that work.
I would also like to, I mean, yes to all that, but we are concerned. We are concerned about the math and English. And as a matter of fact, it was 2 years ago when we decided that change of moving Andy into the principal, that we changed the assistant superintendent to be a superintendent of curriculum because of our concern about those numbers.
Right.
So this year that we're looking at agrees with us and our concerns.
Yep.
So I don't want to brush that under the rug, that we are concerned. We have a lot of great things that are not talked about, and there are some items that aren't, that we weren't focused on that we should be, but it continues to be a concern, and I think our teachers and our principals and our administration is working on that. And I'm excited about the potential.
I would agree. I also would echo the comments that this is not a surprise, that it's not something that we are just now acknowledging. The fact that some people have just stumbled upon this fact doesn't mean that it's a new fact. So yes, we have been looking at this, and we are seeing a lot of improvements. But I think also folks need to understand that, you know, we're not manufacturing widgets where we're going to get a process perfected and from then on it'll be a zero defect environment, right? Whether it's kids exploring the limits of civil conversation, or you know, a particular crop of kids who have challenges with math or personal problems at home. It's going to vary every single year. What I, as a board member, look for is an administration that is on top of those changes, that acknowledges those, that responds to those, that does what our new superintendent has said is iterative improvement. That means you're always paying attention and you're always tweaking, because that's the world that we live in. We don't make machines, we make kids, we make people. And so the process is what's important. So we have an administration that's doing that. I think they're doing really well. I'm looking forward to seeing more new stuff. So yes, we have challenges. That's why we're here. If it was easy, anybody could do it, right? So we're going to have challenges every single year. Just make sure that the administration and us step up to them. That's all we say.
Thank you, Cheryl, and thanks everyone for your comments. I just want to reiterate one more time, because I always feel like I have to, that even the metrics don't reflect the metrics. Because the colors skew what the actual numbers are because of the way the state has chosen to do this. And I'm deeply disappointed by that, but that's the world we live in. So there you go. All right, moving on to item 7.4.1. This is regarding Summit, and this is the discussion about surplusing the property. We have a scheduled public hearing. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
Do we want to report first of information or no? It says the board will receive an update. Do we do that first?
Oh, you know what? I forgot to, we were supposed to receive the information on school performance. So let's do that first. Is there a motion to receive the information that Cheryl just gave us on school performance?
Sure, I'll move to approve, or to receive.
To receive that information.
Information that we received.
Perfect. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor of receiving that information we received? Aye.
Now, is that, we've
That's-
never done that before?
We
is that-
do. We do regularly on LCAP information and
That's what
other.
I'm wondering.
We
It's
and
a
when
particular
textbooks
item.
come before us, we often
Okay.
vote to receive the information that we just received. Yeah.
It's
All right.
unusual though, yeah, it is unusual.
Yeah.
So
It's
are we
not unheard
receiving
of, but.
An update before we open the public hearing?
If you would like an
Sure.
update, the update is that this resolution was prepared based on the guidance from the board at last week's meeting. We had the options for Summit Property Matrix. We had option 1, license agreement, so we have brought that here tonight. And then 2A and 2B, which were to simultaneously work on the lease bid process and the lease waiver to conduct an RFP process. So to start both of those processes simultaneously, at any point we can decide that we would like to go with one, or we have options along the way, but they both are quite timely and require probably several months. And so this proposal is to do kind of everything simultaneously, keep our options open, but continue to move forward in a direction.
And the process here would be to open the public hearing. We've already discussed this at length tonight, but if there are any more public comments, we have those. We close the public hearing. Then there would be some board discussion about the topic, and then there would be the possibility for somebody to move to approve the resolution. Or not. So, all right, so
I'll move to open the public hearing.
is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Is there any more public comment on this topic?
Did you have other sheets? Because you had said earlier you had some.
They were on other topics.
Oh, other topics.
Yeah.
Oh.
Wait, so,
Is
yeah.
that about the lease?
No, this is about voting surplus.
Yeah, the lease would be part of that. Everything you said would fit in this section, but you wanted to go first, so that's fine.
Ask a question then.
Sure.
Isn't there some educational code, I don't know what it is, that if you're gonna do surplus property, you have to keep it public, offer it to people that are not private enterprises first?
That's what starting this process is.
Yes.
So if it's declared surplus and this resolution is accepted, this resolution starts that process of offering for lease to certain public agencies, which is part of the
So where does the
bid
waiver
process.
come in?
So the waiver basically says, and we discussed this, we had a little matrix last week, but the bid process, essentially, we start that, we have that 60-day timeline, we put out the bid notice formally. We have to have a public bid notice where people can come and talk to us, give us bids in person. The board would have to accept the highest bid in that process. You don't have an option. Whatever the highest bid is for whatever uses, you accept that. The waiver allows us to ask the state to have a little bit more control. So we would offer an RFP process instead, which is kind of written proposals, requests for proposals. Those come back to us, and then the board gets to consider the merits of each proposal, and at that point decide which proposal they'd like to accept based on a number of criteria that are kind of specified in that RFP process.
I think going to your question, though, the whole process about offering it to other public agencies happens regardless
Yes.
of which kind of bid process you go through.
Right.
Whether you go through the standard bid process or whether you go through the waiver
But
process.
the timeline is certainly different.
The timeline is different because to get a waiver, you have to go and request the waiver.
But what is the purpose of requesting the waiver?
Well, without the waiver, anybody who wants to respond to the RFP can respond to the RFP. And then we either have to take the high bid or no bid.
They're saying instead of having to take the top number, you take.
But the board
If
has less
somebody
control
wanted to
over who
come
can be awarded.
and build a strip mall there, and they were the highest bidder, we have to take it if we don't have a waiver. The waiver allows us to say, no, we want it to be some kind of an educational facility, or we want it to be, whatever the parameters are, and accept bids and look at bids and not have to take the highest.
To accept proposals.
Right.
Did you put those parameters, like? when
We
you-
haven't
We
put any of
haven't
that
done any
together.
of that.
This item is to allow both of those things to kind of happen
Yeah,
simultaneously.
they-
So you're going to make a decision about whether or not to open this to sell publicly without having a presentation regarding the charter school and that possibility. I'm just trying to get clear. Is that what's happening?
Well, the process of starting a surplus property thing, it can take a year or years. I think with this property, it's taken 3 years plus. It's not, those things aren't mutually exclusive.
And just to be clear, this proposal that's for consideration tonight is not for selling the property. It's for declaring surplus, which means that you can then formally lease it out to other agencies, but it still belongs to the school district in perpetuity until they decide through another process if they would ever like to sell it.
The laws of the state are such that we can't lease a property that we own unless we declare it surplus, even if it's not surplus. It doesn't matter whether it's surplus or not, we have to declare it surplus in order to do that. It makes no sense. It doesn't make sense to be read when you move in a direction. There are lots of things in the state that don't make sense. I'm back to the dashboard thing. I'm never going to let that go.
And I just want to make this point again, both of these timelines, both the bid process and the waiver process are very time consuming. So if we don't start it now, we would essentially not be able to make a decision for the following school year. So this is to allow us to start that process of offering to public agencies, of going to the state board and saying we would like to be able to have some control over our own property and who leases it by having proposals rather than simply selecting the highest bidder. So this is the start of that timeline, but it's not a formal decision about what to do any step of the way. Those all come back to this board to make those decisions at a later time when one of these steps is completed. We come back and say, here's our proposals, here's our bids, what do you think? Just like we're doing with the district office property.
Great.
So,
yeah.
Louise, your question is actually well taken in the sense that this is unusual. I don't think we did it this way for the district property. We just assumed or believed that we would be able to get a waiver and that we want to have control over the property. And so we would go out and ask the state to give us a waiver so we could do an RFP, meaning a request for proposals where we would look at the different proposals and consider its impact on the community, its appropriateness under the circumstances, the billing, everything else, as opposed to just having to accept the highest bid, as Shelley said or whoever said about that.
The thing about it is, I guess, I'm looking at it from Upper Ojai and people in the valley that want a K-8 charter school that you could support, that could be supported by you, but you're gonna have other people doing the work. And I don't know why you would go through this process at this time until you found out that that wasn't a viable thing to happen. Because if we could get a K-8 and we had Rock Tree Sky up there, I mean, you wouldn't have to do all this, but you could be supporting, and it would be programs, I think, that are probably run parallel to what you're trying to do in the valley at your school.
Well, we can't enter into a lease with Rock Tree Sky without doing this.
Well, but you're not going to be able to enter into a lease this year anyway with doing this because you just said how much time it takes, right?
Right, well, we would never be able to unless we did.
Well, but that's not, you would never be able to, but if
No,
you
that's the
have-
law. We
you
would
have
never
a
be able to.
plan, You have a plan.
Property
Yeah.
surplus?
What's that?
You can deem part of the property surplus, right? People, you do that all the time, like certain areas that aren't being used, and then that's how you lease out those portions of the property instead of the entirety of the property.
And just to be clear, declaring surplus at this time doesn't mean that we can never undeclare it surplus. So, for example, in the district property, if we had declared it surplus, we went out to the RFP process and said like, none of these are gonna work, then we, and I don't know the exact word, but essentially it's no longer declared surplus and it returns.
But look at the time you've already put into all this paperwork on preparing the lease. And I think that, I hope that you would agree, and most people would agree, that with Rock Tree Sky and a charter school in Upper Ojai would be a premium for everybody.
I'm under the impression, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we can't lease to a charter school without this either. Is there a way to even have a charter school without surplusing the property? We can't enter into a lease.
It's a public entity.
There's a lot of rules around charter schools and facilities use and having to do with the number of students from within the district, and if you have rights, and providing facilities doesn't necessarily mean which facilities you have rights to. So all of that is separate. If and when a charter school petition comes to the board, that's all kind of considered as part of that.
I would like to talk about my impressions of the possibilities for Summit School based on 4 years ago, Shelley, before you were on the board, when we had the 7-Eleven committee that looked at the 5 elementary schools and at one point had made a recommendation to close Summit, and we voted not to close Summit at that time. And then 2 years later, we were presented with the fact that 23 students had enrolled, and the superintendent at the time contacted those families to let them know that there would only be 23 families, and the cohort in the classroom would be quite small. And so I think 5 other children dropped off the list, and the list dropped down to about 18 students. So what I heard at the time from the community was that if we presented a different model up there, a K-8 model, and something more along the lines of environmental stuff that Rocktree Sky is doing, those numbers would go up. But the issue was we weren't supporting an alternative education up there. And so I think at the time we asked for where would those children come from? How would that, if we could find 45, 50 students instead of 18 to 23, without impacting students coming from, we don't want students coming from Miners Oaks or San Antonio or Topatopa, is that we're not gaining students, and then all we're doing is separating, having teachers, we're spreading thin on teachers and education. That was our big concern about Summit, was the ability to educate children when a teacher was teaching 4 grades and the cohorts were so small. And I have never seen numbers, I hear from Marianne Radcliffe, a number like 75, but I haven't seen I've actually had people approach me who said they were asked to sign a paper and they felt really pressured to sign a paper, but if they had to make a choice, they wouldn't actually make that choice. And so if, I understand your desire to have that and to feel that we're not supporting it. I think I've heard, especially from Kevin and Shelley, how much they would support a school up there, more so than I would, if there was 40 students up there. That it didn't have to be a charter school, it could be an Ojai elementary school or an Ojai K-12 school. But I don't feel like I have been presented with information that would make me believe that that is possible. So then what I heard was, well, you haven't tried. We as a group, as a board, and as an administration haven't tried. We've been asking the Ojai community to try. But I don't know that so I recognize that, I would agree with that. But I don't know how we would go about that without spreading ourselves, talk about the time that's spent doing this, the time that would be spent on that and the possibility that it might actually produce something is low, in my opinion. I know a lot about what's going on in Santa Paula, and I just don't see that many families coming there for a K-8 when they have Ventura right there, they have Mupu, they have Fillmore. What makes us think that they would come here? That's.
Can I just say that there's Mupu School, which is about 5 miles from Summit School, has 160 students in its K-8, and it's full, and it has a waiting list. Ventura School on the Avenue is also K-8, has a waiting list. Ventura Charter School. And Sunset School,
You can't get into 6th, 7th grade.
you can't get into 6th, 7th grade. So I think I don't know if how it's gonna impact Ojai Unified, but I think that those choices up in Summit are viable because of there's no availability here for that. And so you talked about one thing, but I don't think that that's necessarily the way it is when you look at the other community schools in the area. And people these days drive their kids all over. I mean, Talks about driving people off.
For public comments, it's a lot better to speak at the mic because then people can hear. Faith, if you want to.
But do those schools have declining enrollment? Are they suffering declining enrollment in Ventura? No, I'm not talking about the schools, I'm talking about the district in general.
In all districts
Yeah.
except for Mufu, which is a single school district, but all other districts are having declining.
I just want to share that I shared this with the 7-Eleven committee, and I'm happy to share it again, that as a preschool educator, primarily, but now I will be moving up to elementary in the future, I've had numerous parents come to me asking me if I had any recommendations for their children for schools in Ojai, and I didn't wholeheartedly have one school that I could recommend. And I know a lot of parents who resorted to a lot of different creative solutions to educate their children because they didn't see any viable options or options that they felt were highly beneficial for their children in Ojai. And granted, I know that LA gets a bad rap, but as an educator, I tried living in other places, and that's where the most progressive education I could find was happening. And so that's where I decided to live. And was homeless for 5 years just so I could work at the best school in the world that didn't pay me enough to pay my rent, much less all my bills. I was committed. I was willing to do whatever it took. And so there's numerous families that I've spoken to about the charter school that are super excited. They didn't know about it until now. They want to be on board. They are willing to do whatever it takes to create an amazing educational option in Ojai that's progressive, that's based on actual research on how children learn, best educational approaches, social emotional support, permaculture, and really looking at what do we need to teach our children so they are going to be 21st century thinkers and learners who are prepared to work collaboratively, they're critical thinkers, they're solution oriented, and looking at the mathematical and language arts results from just 2 schools, I'm wondering what the curriculum is that is being used and why it's not having the results that we're all hoping for, that we all want for our children. And so I just want to speak on behalf of the community members that I know in Ojai who are sending their children to private schools or that are from homeschooling communities that would in a second, in a heartbeat, send their children to a school that we have the intention of creating. And so I just want to put it out there. I don't know we all know different people. We all have different families and people we're connected to, but there's a lot of support for really amazing education. And I know that this valley is capable of that, and I want to help in whatever way I can, and I'm in full support of this solution-oriented, small group, child-led, emergent curriculum that I know can incorporate all the different developmental and educational aspects that children need in ways that are exciting and get them inspired and ready to take on the future of this planet that they're going to inherit. And that's the kind of education that I really want to help create and that I believe in. So I believe that this charter school has that option, along with Rock Tree Sky. I mean, he has children coming from all over Ventura County to come and do his programs, because people believe in it and they're excited about it. And if we create something, they will come, and I believe in that. And I know it's possible. So.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments on this item? Yeah, Chuck.
Thank you. Board, I want to thank you for taking this difficult subject so long and seriously talking about taking the chin. I know you've had plenty of meetings up there. Several things come to my mind. Kevin, you've talked about whether you'd run again on the board. And I've really enjoyed this board, the great conversations, the in-depth concerns. It's not a rubber stamp by any means. And as I look forward to a plan and with a new superintendent, one of the things I'm concerned about, you were talking about the 7-Eleven. When Hank was here and they had that whole discussion about the 6th graders in the middle school, and the community at that time wasn't too excited about it, but we're now embracing that. And so I'm wondering, in a year from now, that might be an option for people that would exit our district to say, hey, wait a minute, there's an option. And Summit might be it for those kids that want to do 4th, 5th, and 6th. But if we get rid of that option, and I think back to when Dick Adams was here, he's 90 years old, and this used to be his kindergarten, and we talked about how schools, public schools, are always struggling with money, and who better knows that than us, right? So, and as a classified employee in the district, I certainly understand that our resources are limited, and we've done a great job with what we've got, and I'm so grateful to acknowledge the great things that happen in our district every day. And that's why I brought up the Thomas Fire about getting a black eye that no other county experienced what we did. And I know teachers were upset to see those kind of numbers, knowing what they do, and the state doing the rubber or the cookie cutter approach, it could be misinterpreted. So I had brought to you the idea about the water, that we have 2 shares up there, and what if we buy that other share of water and have an option of leasing that other property to Rock Tree Sky for 100 years? And give them the water meter and say, there you go, man, we'll see you in 100 years. But that's half the property. Okay, so
And we
but
looked into
what
that, by the way.
Yeah,
We looked into the water shares.
thank you. It's not available anymore, from
Right.
what I understand.
That's right.
But that's
But
why
we
I
did
brought
look
it up
into it.
before, and thank you for that. Because we are trying to think outside of the box, and the board has looked at all these resources, and we're really skimming it. Seems like we always do, for whatever reasons, beyond our control, because we are public. And that's one of the things that really bothers me, is that privately, people can be rejected. Publicly, we take them all. And I'll never forget, there was one child at the pool. It cost $10,000 for the crane to pick that one child out of the pool. And we did it, because that's who we are, as a public service. So I say all of that because of the plan. And to make this decision, okay, so looking in the resource of the water, subdividing the property, that was just something I thought of before the red light came up. So, but I respect that. We are dealing with resources. I'm looking at that option that, say, for a year from now, we say, hey, the middle school isn't working for parents. If you could give me one more second, or one more minute. The parents that I've been involved with through here, with raising my 6 kids, has been through sports. Sports is an option. Education is the primary. And I have parents here, that hurts me to say this, but they're taking their kids down the hill because they have bigger sports programs. We have excellent sport programs, but I mean, look, we just got another championship team this last year. But education is our primary, and I understand that. So that's why I'm looking as an option, is that if you still give this one more year, that maybe we look at that as if the K-6 or if the middle school thing is not well received, that people can still have an option within the district as opposed to going somewhere else. Since the water didn't work out, maybe there's another option. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for what you do, folks.
Are there any other public comments on this topic?
I just want to say one thing briefly, which is, Chuck, you mentioned me saying I might not run. I don't know when I said it, but I want to be clear, you know, kind of going back to this comment that I made earlier about meanness. I can take it, and I do take it. I really didn't mean to make it personally about me. I guess I take it personally about the schools, though, because I think the schools, I just read sometimes gratuitous comments from people that should know better about how poorly we're educating people in this district, all the problems with education in our district. And, you know, it's definitely a different model than the model of, hey, you know, let's have 3 or 4 kids in a class, or be able to provide this extremely individualized attention. Although I will say, one of my yearly goal, this year's my goal, will be to really work on this volunteer possibility. And I know that Nan Davis has been working on something that might even include an app that allows people to be pre-approved, fingerprinted, authorized to do work in our school district, and just can pick a time in a classroom and say, I'll be there tomorrow at 1 o'clock to help read with kids, whatever. But more people, you know, we have this big job, and no matter what happens, if you guys start a charter school up there, you're going to be able to have a small, presumably, you're not going to be able to educate thousands of kids. You know, we're going to always have the job of educating all of the kids, and anyone who wants to go to our schools, and that's our job. And sometimes I do feel like people come before us and they don't really recognize that our job's different. It's a really hard job, and that's our job. Our job is always to look at the resources and match them to this huge job. I mean, we just all went to the, I know Jim was there, and a number of you were at the Most Likely to Succeed, which Tiffany put on, which is a different model for education. And as I watched that, I thought to myself, well, that was like, hey, kids, we're going to combine physics with history, and you're going to make a model. And I thought to myself, a lot of art is like that in our district right now, with really creative people doing really interesting things. Steve Gard famously does some wacky stuff in his classes, and there are lots of great teachers out there doing lots of different things. But it's still, we're going to be always a district, at least for now, with pretty big class sizes. We're going to be doing our best to educate every single kid, and like I said, I really think an area for improvement where people won't hopefully be so predisposed to not consider the public schools is to get more volunteers, more bodies, more one-on-one engagement.
And I would say we are working on that. Volunteers is
no,
next up on my list.
You've hit
We
the
have
ground running, man.
a few plans for that. We just can only pack so much into a particular agenda item. And frankly, I'm interested, and Cheryl and I are both excited to putting some of these facilities things aside so that we can do that work specifically with kids. But volunteers is, stay tuned. We
Great.
have some ideas.
Angie, why don't you go first and then Jim? Yeah. We
Um,
used to have this other great teacher who did wacky science stuff in our
I
school.
heard of him.
Yeah, and then he left. I don't know.
Tim Faley was his name.
That's a sore subject.
It wasn't his fault that he left, though. Let's just clarify, because we were pretty sad when he left.
I was sad, dark days.
Yeah.
Dark days.
I'm Angie Janassi. I'm a teacher in the district and the Ojai Federation of Teachers president. And I feel like I'm getting confused with the conversation. So I want to clarify so I'm reporting out correctly. You want to deem the property surplus. That's what we're doing right now, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And by doing that, it allows for you to have more discretion on what goes on that property, correct?
It actually allows us to do anything. So unless it's deemed surplus, we can't lease it, we can't sell it, which is not an option, but we can't do anything unless it's deemed surplus.
Okay, so there's the surplus option, then there's the waiver. Where does the waiver come in, so I understand that?
So there's once it's surplus, and we
Okay.
say we want to lease it, because that's been the 7-Eleven committee, everything has been around leasing, so selling is off the table. That's not been.
Got it.
But it's surplus, then we can lease it. There's 2 options for that lease process. There's actually 3 options, but I had the little chart, and I should, we don't still have that from last week, do we? We had it last week.
Yeah, I know. Confusing.
I saw your chart,
So
yeah,
there's essentially option 1, we have a bid process.
Right.
For who would like to lease the property.
Okay.
We have to take the highest bidder, no matter
Right,
what.
exactly.
There's a whole process with that. Option 2, we lease the property, but we ask the state for a waiver to the bid process, so that then we can submit RFPs, so proposals.
Got it.
And then we can select from the proposals
The one that best
who we
fits
would like
us.
to lease,
Right.
and we can tailor the proposals to be. Now, that lease can be for however long we do. This says nothing about who leases it,
Right.
how long they lease it, what's leased there. None of that is identified in this. This just allows us to start that process of notifying public agencies that the property is surplus and that we intend to lease it in the future.
Okay,
That-
so first there's the surplus, which is what you're doing. Then you have the waiver and or the non-waiver if we end up with no waiver, if they don't deem that, if they don't do that. If we have the waiver, that gives you pretty much complete control to say, this is what we want to do, these are the bids that came in, these are the proposals, we don't like any, or we like this one, it fits with our values, it fits with the community, this is what we choose. Or all of them come in, if it's not under the waiver, this is the highest bidder, and you basically have to take the highest bidder. Correct?
Or nothing.
Or nothing at all, which you could then say, no, we don't want a strip mall, which was okay. So we're having the discussion about the charter school. Where that comes in is that at any point in this process, can you say, wow, you got 75 kids. We're going to push this aside now and then we can go ahead and do the charter. Is that correct?
At any time, yeah.
At any time? Okay, I was just getting confused because it was sounding like there's no charter going, once you deem it surplus, the charter's out the door, but that's not true at all. It's just, you're opening up the options for the entire property. If it opens it up to something, I mean, who knows, it might open, that's the thing that I keep hearing is your options are open, and the beauty of that is you never know what's going to come in, and it could be something like what you guys are talking about, where it's a proposal that fits for the charter in one way, even if you have a certain number of kids, but it also opens it up as a community center or somebody wants to do that for the community. So it seems like we're getting caught in the weeds because you have to do the surplus. If you get the waiver, that gives you complete control. You ultimately have complete control, but the charter isn't in any way affected by
I
this.
think the only way that the charter is affected is if we enter into a lease. Let's say we enter into a lease with Rocktree Sky for 5 years. In that 5 years, we are committed to that lease.
For the 5 years.
For that particular property.
For that,
Right.
right.
And
So the
whether or not a
charter
charter has
would-
rights to a particular property is kind of determined by the number of kids that
Got
are
it.
within district, the time frame, et cetera, right? So the,
Right, I remember that from
Yeah.
our meetings in the past when we were talking, is that you can bring a charter and the school district can say, great, we love the charter, but it doesn't work at Summit and we're gonna put it at San Antonio or Topa or what, because, okay, I was getting so confused.
Good job explaining.
Yes.
No,
Thank
we've
you.
tried to explain it many times. That was a very good.
Okay,
and I would just say the reason for
Thank you.
doing the bid process and the waiver at the same time is because we've been advised that the state board may or may not approve a waiver. They did on this property, but it kind of depends on a case-by-case basis. If we went through all of this, and the state board will take us, the waiver process will be a few months. If we went through all of this and the state board denied our waiver, we would have to start all over again with doing the bid process. And so
Right.
the idea is to kind of shorten the timeline and allow more flexibility of options by doing them simultaneously instead of waiting for one, seeing what happens, and then having to wait for another one if possible.
Got it, okay, and then there's also the possibility, I believe, as you were speaking and you were saying, I mean, you never know, right? We never know that you're bringing all these wonderful, incredible ideas, which may bring kids from all over the area saying, well, let's do it, and then who knows what happens up at Summit. You never know where all that creative energy leads. So I think sometimes we get all caught up in the fear, which I've spent many years being all caught up in the fear and trying really hard to let go of fear and see the possible opportunities. Because we don't know this is your 4th week. Last week it was your 3rd week, right? So this is the 4th week. So we don't know, you know what I mean? Like, who knows what's going to happen? Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Great. Thanks, Angie. Jim, you're up.
Jeez. I think you're right in some ways, Angie. I think us, Rocktree Sky, Jim Bailey, for the record, not being at Summit, I can see a public school getting developed up there with all the great things that are happening currently in this district, and us, finding our way elsewhere. I could see it. So I want to say, for me, proud public school teacher, mother was a school secretary 20 years. Kevin Ruff, your words hit home. In some ways, there's no way I'd rather be, but it wasn't an option to stay in Ojai as a single dad with my daughter and be a public school teacher because of the declining enrollment issue. And I didn't want to teach elsewhere, so I went to the private route. And then this whole thing happened, right? So believe me, there's part of me and a discussion my wife have all the time, like, how could we work for the public schools and do the work, and even do that work, not the easy work, but that hard work you discuss, and it's always on our minds. So do know that that's there. To me, I think this whole issue is a resource allocation issue. Summit does not have the number of kids needed to open a public school up there. We were around, we had numbers, we can, facilities use agreement, license agreement, and put good money into the school district. Until such a time that families move to Upper Ojai, or you have the need to open a public school there and you have the numbers, we will gracefully go find another home. So I just want to be clear about that. In no way do I feel that if the surplus happens, if we are granted some amount of lease time, that's going to mean we're there in perpetuity. This is something that allows resources to better be used elsewhere in the community and for us to provide resources into the district. And I just wanted to share that. So.
Thank you. Any other public comments on this topic? Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. Is there any comment from the board or a motion to approve the resolution? And/or, not mutually exclusive.
I'm wondering, just a quick discussion on moving to approve the resolution with the addition of a, let's see how we put it here, a direction to staff to proceed with some major projects up there.
Yeah, to move forward
To
with
move
the
forward
bid
with
process or
the bid process for the
repairs,
parking lots
yeah.
and that. Is that
So,
doable?
yeah,
or-
so you, at any time, if, as part of this, if we are preparing to eventually lease the property and the board would like to continue with major maintenance at the site so that it's prepared for leasing with an appropriate roof and paving or whatever those major projects were. Those are all kind of out there, the money's on hold, just waiting for direction to staff to continue.
So it doesn't need to be part of
It
this?
doesn't have to be a resolution. What would happen is those, we hear you, we're here, we, bond manager, here. And then we proceed with getting bids, and then those bids come back to you for approval item by item. So the roofing bid would come back to you, and the paving or whatever those bids, and then you can approve or talk about those at that particular time. And if somebody said, I don't want to put bond money into Summit, then you could deny that bid, but the idea is all of those will come back to you at some point.
So
if
we
you
can direct staff to move forward with the
Okay.
bid
And we
process.
did do some air conditioning work up there,
Yeah, I was
didn't
gonna say,
we?
Yes.
it's not the full
I-
500.
I'm not sure, I called, from the paper.
I'm sorry,
that
we
I
were
got,
looking behind you at the bond manager.
What I show
It
is
shows like
36.
actual and the HVAC at the top, and before I said anything, I clarified that you said that none of the work had been completed.
Adam, can you clarify
So I don't know
what's,
if I
It was
misunderstood
before
or.
my time, but my understanding is there has been some AC work done there.
and then DSA, some DSA work also?
And the
certifications.
DSA
remediation work as well.
Right.
Yeah, well, the actual was because the work was much less extensive than we thought. We replaced one compressor and then serviced the units, and that was it.
Which is actually a good point. So just because somewhere on here it says a certain amount is allocated for any school, that amount could be more or less depending on how the actual projects come in.
Right.
It's less about the amount and it's more about the projects on the list.
Job that needs to be done, yeah.
Right.
Just FYI, I thought I would, in our, moment of future agenda items, suggest that next board meeting, bond manager come and give us a presentation on the current condition of Summit and, ideas for what we would do, and then it would be, it seemed like an orderly process for doing it.
I'd almost suggest September though, only because of all the projects going on.
Well,
Pardon?
So many things.
There
I-
are so many things,
And
but.
but if they have an opportunity to go ahead and get some bids, then we have more to discuss in September.
Yeah, I was thinking more in terms of, here's where we would focus, here's what we think needs to be done, et cetera. As we all know, if you've sat through the whole process of the bond, sometimes what we saw in those reports ended up not completely aligning with the reality.
So staff could get bids, bring them back as part of a future agenda item presentation and have bids potentially for like roof and paving seem to be the big two.
We can certainly, do the roof inspections and the paving. So some of that stuff.
We would know a lot more.
And also have a future agenda item specifically around this.
Okay, so I'll move to approve resolution 1920-01 for surplus property of the Summit site.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Moving to 7.4.2, this is the license agreement with Rock Tree Sky. It's not a lease, it's a license, which means it's revocable at any time. But we can't do anything other than that without the other. So is there any discussion from the board, or is there a motion to approve?
I just want to say, I mean, it's substantially more money than last year, as you know.
I don't play around.
It is, it is. And it's for the extra rooms.
Yeah.
We feel good there, it feels right. I think it allows the district to bring in somebody else. I mean, I'm not trying to get I don't need to have a free lunch. I don't want to pay a lot for my lunch. But it is a lot more, and we can do it, and we're glad to. I think it's a fair price.
It's a good comment, because, yeah, that could get lost, that it's a significant increase from the last.
I actually like this lease. I think it gives us the breathing space.
License.
Sorry. License. It does give us some breathing space. And I think it's important that people recognize that, I think it's been said here before, we've been talking about this for a couple of years now. Some people think we've been actually dragging our feet, and those of us who've been accused of that have been really reluctant to let go of Summit, much to the criticism of a lot of people. I think it should be recognized that there are a substantial number of people who think we should shut it down and move on. And so this board has struggled to reconcile both of those points of view. But the one thing that we cannot do is engage in wishful thinking. And so we have said over a couple of years now, if there were substantive interest in enrollment in that facility, we would keep it open and we would maintain a program. We've yet to see that. And so our fiduciary responsibility is to deal with reality, not hopes and not dreams. But this gives us time that maybe some of those dreams will come to fruition. Maybe our own administration will figure something out. It gives us time to work on the issue, and I'm confident that our administration recognizes that it's an issue that needs working on. So I think RTS is a reliable and trustworthy tenant to give us that time. So I'm strongly in favor of this.
I'm really happy that we have a partner like Rock Tree Sky, because it's very difficult to find anybody who would want to pay for such a tenuous position, you know, and so I'm happy for that.
The point being that it's a license and not a lease.
That's correct.
That under the terms of the license can be at literally any moment, although I believe it says the parties will try to give 2 months' notice, but literally under the lease or the license could be tomorrow. Could be told, hey, we're going to retake it tomorrow, and that would be okay under the license.
Has it been determined that anyone else is using the property? Or,
Well, Condor Kids.
Condor Kids are, and I think the committee is meeting there occasionally.
And this is a non-exclusive license, so it doesn't mean that you are the only group using this.
4-H,
Yeah.
search and rescue, water board.
and those entities we are just generously
They
offering?
would use our facilities use process, right? So there's some kind of
Okay.
facilities use agreement and process, which needs a little retooling, along with a few other things, so stay tuned for that as well. But there's a facilities use agreement, which, I mean, you could use, you would just have to fill it out like every
day.
time. So this is slightly more than a facilities use agreement, less than a lease.
Okay.
But non-exclusive, so
And
other
so
people
there
can.
are
yeah.
still others. Thank you.
And facilities use, hopefully typically we're doing that for free, right?
I think it depends on
I'm
the
a big
entity,
believer,
doesn't
you know,
it?
years ago, we had this conversation 4 years ago with some of the, I think, Girl Scouts.
Scouts.
And I feel like, you know, from a community perspective, the amount of money that we can gain relative to the good faith and, you know, having our facilities be a real community resource is important.
So I think in the future, I would expect an agenda item that is around just looking at our facility use rate sheet, our structure, and just making sure that we're in alignment and that it's systematically applied to every property in the district.
Fair enough. All right, on this topic?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'll move to approve the license agreement with Rectory Sky for non-exclusive use of Summit Elementary during 1920 school year.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. All right, now, that's Summit. Now we're moving to this property. There was a closed session meeting last week, and we were waiting for some specific language in order to read that out properly. So let me do that fairly quickly now. So this is July 17th, 2019, closed session reporting out language. The board met with its real property negotiators in closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8 regarding proposed price and terms of payment considerations associated with the possible ground lease and development of the district's administrative office / Chaparral High School site. The district sought and received authorization from the State Board of Education to use a request for proposal RFP process to solicit proposals and has received proposals to potentially ground lease and develop the property from 3 interested parties. District administration has conducted a preliminary review of each proposal in order to clarify terms and compare such proposals with the district's financial needs. The board has provided direction to district administration to continue to clarify potential proposal terms associated with the proposal received from Playground Design LLC and Seal Rock Investments LLC, which process may include development concept exploration discussions with representatives from the city of Ojai. Upon conclusion of such clarification and exploration discussions, the board shall be presented with the final proposals received and may take further action. So that's what happened in the closed session last week.
Do you want to say that in speak easy? English?
Yeah, so in English, we received, just to make it simple, we received basically 3 proposals. They were evaluated on a number of terms. The critical one for us to start with is the financial piece, because without the financial piece, it doesn't matter what the other pieces are. And there was one that was significantly better financially for the district than the other 2. And so we directed staff to continue negotiations or discussions with the one that was significantly better than the other 2.
And we met with the city representatives from the city and discussed having a joint concept exploration meeting.
Right.
To bring that proposal publicly to discuss that in conjunction with the city.
Which we're looking forward to doing.
September 17th, if that works for all of you. I just got the date before this meeting.
Great, so this resolution basically spells out what we just talked
This
about.
resolution rejects the other 2 proposals.
Right.
And then it does not accept the 3rd proposal. We are just continuing discussions. It may ultimately be rejected as well, or
Right.
it may be accepted, but we would like to notify the other 2 groups that they have been rejected.
Right.
And they have been notified?
Any additional comments from the board or a motion to approve the resolution?
I guess the only comment is the obvious that merely moving forward to continue the conversation is just that. We've talked, again, the context that we've been talking about, surplus. The same thing applies here. It can be reversed. I mean, depending on, there's so many miles before we sleep on these subjects that this is just the going forward, but it doesn't really mean that we end up arriving at any significant place.
Right. It just means we're gonna keep walking down the road for a piece.
Very, very slowly. In terms of the submission process, there's one element that I want to really get clear in my head. All three submitters were given an opportunity to revise and change their terms and on offer, were they not?
And to submit their best offer.
Okay, and it was based on those subsequent
Best offers.
submissions that we are making this decision? Okay, thank you.
Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous.
And then we will poll you later to see if September 17th is a day that would potentially work for the next step of bringing this forward publicly.
And that's.
By
a
later,
joint
you mean
meeting
by email, or?
Yes,
Okay.
With the city.
unless you want to do it right now. However you want to do it.
Should we do it later? Let's,
Yeah.
okay, let's do it later. 7.4.4, this is approval of a change order for Miramonte Elementary School roofing. Is-
I'm going to speak on it because I was the one last week who was
Right.
opposed to speaking on it. We have information from the principal on the use of that building and the need for it, but I have to say how disappointed I am in the process before your time. I think of the purchase of that room, the painting of that room, and the roof of that room, we could have built a bathroom on another room.
In the classroom.
In the classroom. And it's just very disappointing. I mean, I
have the
hate to
same
approve
comment.
this, I hate to do it, but I see the need for it, and now we're behind the 8 ball on having a TK classroom with a bathroom. And,
I totally agree with your comments about the process, but I know how much money we've spent building bathrooms, and I disagree. I think whenever we've had to build a bathroom, it's cost 2 or 3 times that. But 100% agree about the process.
So I'll be bringing, hopefully in the future, to administration a discussion item about how that would take place in the future, and if we have a certain amount of money that we tie to a need to come to the board, or how that process works.
Can we put it
I mean, I
in
know
some
that's
perspective?
Tiffany's interest too.
Sorry, just the, how is it, are there other facilities that we don't own on our property elsewhere?
Yes?
Yes.
And David would have a good,
Toba, same building, CDR as well.
The old
And
Smart Start
Congress was
buildings.
Same.
I think a good item for a future agenda would be to kind of get us an update on what facilities we may not own and what the current status is of those.
So all of our other TK
Oh,
classrooms.
I'm sorry, other than that, that's it? Just one other building?
You don't hold me to it, but I'm pretty sure that's.
Okay, now we're updated.
That's-
Consider us updated.
Yeah. We can avoid that one.
Excellent job, Dave.
And is it the case that all the other TK classrooms have bathrooms?
except for San Antonio. But bathrooms are an issue. They're an issue. Yes, when we have them, when we don't have them, there's, yeah.
I remember, Angie, your classroom didn't have a bathroom when my son started there. And the difference, I think did it come mid-year that year?
After I called and said, let me explain to you what it's like to have
It's
4 and
crucial.
5-year-olds in a classroom without a bathroom.
Yeah.
And once they understood, they went, I had no idea.
So-
That's the.
I do remember that, and I do remember the difference that having a bathroom in that classroom made.
I would also say that there was some grant money in this year's budget, some facilities money, not in our budget, but in the state budget, to do modifications for TK kindergarten facilities, specifically around bathrooms, playgrounds, etc. So we're exploring that option to see if that's something that applies to us, and if that's something we would qualify for.
And is there any potential that we qualify even though we've already spent the money to recoup?
That's part of the
That's a
exploration
dream?
process.
Okay. All right, because I would agree with Jane that I am disappointed in the process, that there wasn't a chance for us to have a discussion. And I had the same question, because I do remember putting a bathroom into that classroom, how much that cost, and whether that would have been a better option or not, or even if it is an option, but having that discussion, I think, would have been important.
Are we relatively comfortable that this is all there's gonna be?
No.
For this thing? So we don't actually know what potential other repairs are necessary right now?
So we do. Adam did a site walk today, and we've spent quite a lot of time in the last 2 days talking about this. Kind of the big, we think for around $5,000, we can do roof and minor kind of interior things that we need to do. However, the air conditioner is from 2003, which is, for reference, almost 20 years old. So it's great that it's still working, but could we turn it on one day and have it not work? Sure. So am I confident that this is it? No. Can I see bringing you an air conditioner for this building sometime in the future? Yes.
So potentially another 10, 15 grand.
15,000.
Yeah.
But it's working right now.
And perhaps that state money could facilitate that?
We
I
have
mean, it's
not
not a
begun a
bathroom and a
deep
playground.
exploration into that money, but usually the state process is several years out, and you have to get in kind of a queue, and you have to have plans, and there's a whole bunch of things that we haven't done, but David and I have been talking about, there's a high likelihood that there will be some additional facilities money coming from the state in a number of different ways, and that generally requires you to be in the queue and be prepared. So we're talking about what projects, TK, kindergarten, or otherwise, might we submit that would be out there so that if funding comes, we are in the line, because usually what they say is, oh, if you were in the line, you get it. If you weren't in the line, you don't have access. So we may be in line for some project that may or may not ever happen, but if money becomes available, we would have access. So
It makes me wonder if this is another indicator of a mandate to have preschool, mandatory preschool coming our way as well.
well, they're funding preschool this year, and so I would say indications are that we are beginning to take preschool TK very
more
seriously
seriously.
and putting our resources behind that.
All right. We are where we are.
Can I ask one
Yeah.
more question?
Sure.
With this roofing, is this Garland also, or because it's a portable, it's something else?
Garland.
It is
Yeah.
Garland
It's a Garland
also?
restoration with a 15-year warranty.
So do we have a motion to approve? 7
Move
point.
to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye, it says it right here.
No.
I'm opposed.
Okay. That's 4-1. All right. 7.4.5, do we have an update on this item?
Yes, I have some photos to show you so that you can see what we're talking about. So this is the paving at Miramani, and I will say this is basically worst case scenario for us in every way possible. We, as you can see, took out, and Adam can jump in since he lives this every day. Actually, do you want to talk about actually, you can give a specific overview, and I want to talk about a few things. So we opened up the asphalt, and we found that instead of the 1 to 2 layers, we thought that there were many layers. And essentially, this created an unforeseen condition that created the need for extra work, right?
So just to clarify, we took this out to bid.
Through the formal bid process.
We got a bid through the formal bid process.
Correct.
And then we started work on it and found out that it was a very different situation than we expected.
Correct. When we initially walked the site to establish the initial scope for the contract that was approved, we actually walked it with 2 different paving companies. One of them is one of the largest in the region. And we agreed on the scope. We went out to bid. But once they pulverized everything, they did find out that it was a completely different animal in the subbase down there. On top of the fact that there has been multiple layers put on top of this, to the tune of at least 3 layers and over 8 inches of asphalt in some locations. So you can see some of the tire marks here. We had the tractors and the pulverizer literally falling in 2 feet in some sections. You can walk across it, and if anybody remembers the old water beds that were the one ladder, it was like that. The whole ground would just wave as you go.
So
What did
was the original or the initial notion that you would get down to some level of asphalt that then would become the base of what you would put on? And
Yeah.
and now you're just taking everything off all the way down to the dirt? and
So the initial thought was, yeah, we figured we had 2 layers of asphalt on there. We went out, we dug down, again with these 2 companies, we had 2 for sure we knew. So we thought we'd take the first layer off, we'd pulverize it, remove a portion of it, about 60% of the grindings would be removed. The rest of it would be used as the new base, and then we would go over the top with 3 inches of new asphalt. Now that's not the case. We had, again, mudded dirt coming up higher than the original asphalt level. It was just the ground was pumping so much. So
And what causes that?
it's all the groundwater. We had a couple different soils companies out. We had a former public works inspector come out. We had a few people come out, and everybody says it's probably a combination of A, the location, B, the wet winter, C, that whole wetlands area. That on the other side is the Land Conservancy, and that one of the soils techs did say it appears that the water is essentially trapped there. So it could be the soil. He said it also could be, frankly, the buildings. If some of these have some of the footings we saw at the Tillahaw gym, you have footings of over 40 inches down of concrete and some block walls. So it could essentially just be trapping the water in there as well.
So this is as of today.
This is as of today. You can see we found this drain pipe. This to the left is the CDR building over here, and this is the playground. This drain pipe goes from east to west basically, and it is a 12-inch plastic pipe that was put in at some point. That runs from that drain towards us basically. That we discovered.
It was just buried under the asphalt?
And yeah, this picture is not so great, but you can see it right there. The top of the pipe is actually taller than the base of that tether ball pole. So there was about a half an inch of asphalt on the top of that pipe. So this bit also includes moving those 2 catch basins, putting in the proper 8-inch
So the water was going into a drain and then getting shot
It
out?
had nowhere to go. Yeah.
Just underground, under
Right.
the asphalt?
It would go into the pipe and it had nowhere to go. Once the water built up, it runs out towards the highway to the, I guess, east of the CDR building. And Chuck can actually attest to some of the water getting stuck in there. And once it got enough, it would finally make its way out. But it was put in at the time. This is from the same playground, just looking the other direction. And similar view. I would say if I can go back to here, this last one. The silver lining to all of this is we are going to be able to actually properly drain this school now. Before this, about a quarter of the water would make it to the proper storm drain, which is on the north end of the school. That was just the pitch of the playground. With us being able to do this, we'll actually put in 2 new catch basins. We'll move the other one that had the plastic pipe. So we'll probably capture just over 2/3 of the water now will go to the north and to the proper storm drain and out, as opposed to going out underneath the CDR building, which we are now keeping. So it will prolong the life of the CDR building as well. And I know that's a big deal for Chuck's team, is changing the direction of that water. We have not only all the water that comes off of this field from here, basically. You can see the water used to go from here all the way over here to that palm tree. And that's about all the water we would capture from the whole playground to go to the proper storm drain. That'll change. And all the water from this roof here and those two channels used to funnel onto the playground and go out towards the CDR building. Now it will actually go to the north. It'll actually drain properly, so.
How about some rain catching?
Collection?
Yeah, collection. Can we add that under the grant?
We could. The goal is,
Not with this
obviously, we don't
big.
have a shortage of water here, so the goal, at least on this campus, the goal is to get it out. The cost is high, and it's one of those where we've had, again, a soils guy, we had a third-party independent company that actually did this up at Goleta come out and talk to us. We had a public works inspector come out. All of them had the same recommendation, that we need to over-excavate all this. We need to put the cement in, essentially creating a cement pad underneath, then put 8 inches of base down, and then the asphalt. It's overkill. It's a playground, which was but everybody had the same message so far.
So, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Just remind me, if you know, what is our plan under Measure J for the playing fields? And given the scope of this, does it make sense to be involving the playing fields at this point?
All the fields, there's the general line item is grass field restoration. That's all it says. There's not a lot of money in each line item. I think San Antonio has the largest line item for that. And the consensus on that was actually to help use some of that to fund the parking lot. But we could look into it. That would be,
Well,
that
I'm
would be
just
something
wondering,
we talked to Chuck about as well.
usually
but
problems like this don't just suddenly end
it
at
won't.
a field, you know?
It won't, yeah.
I mean, in terms of grading or whatever, you know?
Right. We do have, we could always use the dirt out there. I mean, Chuck and I have been talking about it, trying to take some of this dirt and dump it on the far side, because there is an erosion issue there from the wetlands coming into the Land Conservancy. So we could definitely bloom this up into something huge.
Well, I'm not looking to do, I'm just wondering if I just want to make sure that we're being efficient, because if we ended up having to do significant work on the field, I assume this would be the moment to do it.
It would be, yeah. I do think, though, that the field seems to be the field does indeed have a similar issue. Chuck has shared some stories from years past of, a mower sinking in out on the far corner and stuff. So it does crop up from time to time. That being said, the issue here is just that, there's the kids playing on it, there's the occasional people driving on it, and all of the above. I don't think we would want to over-excavate the whole field and, re-engineer the field, is my.
At this time, that's not
Not
a
at this
line
time.
item in the
Yeah.
Measure J.
I don't
fund.
think,
With
there's not
this-
the funds for it
Right.
at this time. Not to that
Can I
extent.
ask, so this is just a change order, right?
Yeah, so let me walk through that process. So,
Because that's what.
it cannot be a change order. It philosophically, it's closer to a change order, but it's outside the 10%, so it's not a change order. We're asking, and we asked in this, for the board to approve a public policy exception, which allows us to waive the procedure of getting multiple bids. Again, it's a really difficult decision. We would rather not do that, but as you can see, we are up against starting school with this, right? So if we do not do the waiver of public policy exception, we have two options. We can do an informal bid process, which takes 10 days. We will not have this done before school starts. We can do a formal bid process, which takes 14 days, and we will not have this done before school starts. So that is the decision tonight. We can go any way. However, this is a little bit of a PR nightmare for us with parents coming to start school. We believe that it was an unforeseen condition that created the need for this extra work. It's essentially an extension of the same project that was awarded through the formal bid process, that the amount is proportional with what's been bid in the first place, and the The contractor is the one who has received all of our paving bids in the
He's
district.
actually, yes,
Right.
correct. He's been the low bidder on every project
Right.
so far this summer.
There's no conceivable benefit to go through the formal or informal bid process, because likely this will be the only person who bids on it. He's been our lowest bidder in all of our other processes. But in fact, there's a negative impact on the school with regards to opening school with this.
But is
So-
there not another person who wants to bid on the project, isn't there?
There very well could be. I know the two larger companies in the area have told me that they, before the summer, that they wouldn't be bidding on any of our projects for the whole summer, just because they're busy. But that doesn't mean that some smaller company in Ventura could want to bid it, absolutely.
Am I not?
The letter that we received was actually from a union stating that we were not following the proper process, but not that they wanted to bid on it, just that they wanted us to follow the formal bid process, which puts us after school. So the reason we weren't doing that is because we believe that the cost of doing that is greater in this case than the benefit of doing that, given the start of school.
So let me ask a question, an idea outside of the box. Can we not approve a change order within the 10% that moves the project forward while we're doing a 10-day informal process of a lesser project, because there's already a step that's been completed?
We could, I honestly, and it's one thing we were talking about today, I don't know. The next step is taking out all the dirt. That's the next step. We could approve a change order to, let's say, level this and grade it out.
Except we don't have a proposal for that change
But we
order.
don't have a proposal, yeah.
So if we're really down to days here. So if we were to approve this public policy exception, they would be out there in the morning doing this work in
Right.
order to get it done by the time school starts.
What
If we don't, then we do nothing, and then in 10 or 14 days, we continue to start with work, whatever it looks like.
So the public policy exception would let us start and be completed before school is beginning. If we don't, we might as well do the formal and take the extra 4 days, do everything, properly, by the letter of the law.
How deep
Are
is
there
Those 4 days aren't gonna
parameters?
matter, we're already into the school year. It's already not gonna get done if we don't do the policy exception.
Are there parameters to understanding what the policy, what is it called,
The public policy exception, so
How do you know if you qualify for the public
I
policy?
called our attorney and we walked through it, and we
Okay.
walked through the scope, we walked through what we're doing, we walked through why we want it. He believes that this is why I'm reading these specific languages, because we believe that it was an unforeseen condition, it's essentially an extension of the same project that went through the formal bid process, et cetera, et cetera. So these would, but if it were to go to litigation, they could side with us or not side with us, depending on how. But we believe, so this is one of those hard cases where we would like to follow the formal bid process. However, what is the impact to students and families of coming to school and having nowhere to line up, no going outside essentially for 2 weeks, and having the paving occurring during school?
With an extremely low likelihood that anybody else is gonna bid on this anyway.
Or that would have the lowest bid,
They keep-
right?
yeah.
We've demonstrated that this particular
Pub-
company, who already did this first part of the project, has had the lowest bid.
Obviously cannot say that definitively.
Right.
Obviously, we're not sure if somebody very well could.
But that's what
So that's my
led us.
question is how did we end up on this group's radar, the CIFAC? Is it a
CPAC?
union? CPAC?
I don't know.
Is there another potential bidder who is paying attention and is
I think they just
is it
monitor.
potentially
No, it's
the
okay.
broker that was having issues with us?
Or they may just monitor agendas.
Every
It could
single
potentially
agenda?
be like the going to district elections, right?
What a boring job.
Okay, so this is my concern.
But I don't know
where
the
it's
answer to that.
$173,000 project, and then we're adding litigation, which could be $200,000. So that's my I don't understand if this is on the agenda, why we can't change it to, be an approval of an extension, that's what we're talking about, I see, you're saying this is an exemption.
This is an exemption from doing both either the informal or the formal bid process based on the fact that those things that I outlined. It was an unforeseen
Yeah.
condition that created the need for extra work, essentially an
But
extension.
why can't we just approve, change the, let this go, this change, because we're concerned about litigation, do this change order and approve a change order that it's within the 10%, and start tomorrow the 10-day process?
We don't have a change order that's for a scope of the project that's within 10%.
But if we have a change order, why can't we change that and vote on it right here? We're all here.
I don't know that we can change this proposal, change order proposal that was sent to us.
I mean, it sounds like the next step is just more, cost substantially more than 10%.
Yeah.
Right, that's right.
So it wouldn't be a change order, it would be outside it. I guess my big concern more than anything is safety. I mean, earth moving equipment on a school site during school time just seems like a recipe that we don't want to even consider.
And there's no space. I went out there today to really walk it and look at it and see where kids could go. There's no place. They can't go out there at all.
Yeah,
That you can't access the fields, even to play on the fields instead of the blacktop, without going through the blacktop to get to the fields. There's no.
So we would have to put up temporary chain link fencing around all of this prior to the start of school.
You'd also have to put up some blocking, because there's classrooms with windows that it would be really, really hard to pay attention to a teacher with excavators out there.
I mean, the TK classroom is there, we talked about today.
It'll
Right.
be very quiet. These are the silent.
As I mentioned, this is not an easy issue. We wish there was a better answer. We are really up against no good option at this particular time. But we chose this one to present to you because we thought it was in the best interest of kids, but there's no easy answer.
Adam, what assurance, and then Chuck has a comment, I guess. What assurance I always worry when someone knows that the bid they're giving is not competitive and that effectively they've got you over a barrel. So here's my bid,
Right.
So what assurances do we have that this is not an excessive bid? I mean, I guess, kind of an obvious question. It seems
Do we
reasonable
trust the guy?
to you guys? Yeah. Is it comparable, at least in terms of the amount of man hours and the
It's
scope of the work?
expensive.
Is it similar to what we're paying in the first instance for the?
It's certainly more, but the issue, honestly, is one of the biggest issues after talking to him is, the amount of money that comes from the pavement recycling that has to actually mix in the cement mix, that constantly mixes in to get that 18 inches deep, as well as trucking all this dirt off. Even if we put it somewhere on site, we put X amount of thousands of tons on site at Miramani or Nordoff, those trucking hours are expensive. At prevailing wage, it's expensive. So.
Chuck? Yeah. Yeah.
No, we were just talking about the public building, which is at the south end of this playground, and you didn't like the process about how we acquired this building. I don't either. And I want to really thank Adam and Alan, because they're tag teaming on a lot of these issues. There is a real issue here. In 1996, I had a truck and trailer go through the asphalt because of the squirrel activity, and that's when we talked about there's no base underneath there. And so rather than do the Band-Aid approach, these guys are trying to present to you the real deal, and I'm grateful for that, because I've inherited a lot of Band-Aids. So when we look at this project here from the north to the south, the 12-inch pipe is on the north end of the property because the county's aware that we have a water issue. And so they're addressing to get the water away from the classroom before it gets to the classroom. In 1998, when they brought those classrooms in on the south side, the semi-truck actually went in there, it was sinking, and they had to take the plywood off the sides of the building and throw it underneath the truck because it was in that water table. So it's a real deal, and he's got a real answer, and the fact that we're up against the timeline, they threw it at you about the building, and if I were to tell you that the roof damage is because a tree branch fell on that roof, it missed the teacher, but it took the door off the building. Do you guys know that? But the process, so here it's reversed. You're asked to be in a hurry up. I'm grateful that you want to do the right job, and I've seen these people do the work already at Nordock. Doug's done some great work over there. Instead of hauling off the spoils, he filled in a lot of our dangerous areas over there. So I've seen a quality of work. I'm grateful that the conversation is, let's do it right. Because my question, and I have had this happen at Topa, where a child falls, breaks an arm. Fire truck can't get there. And the ground at Topa is very slick like this once it gets wet. So they had to gurney that kid all the way up to the top of the property. Here, there is a fire hydrant at the south end of the property because it's so far from the street. The fire truck would be on there, I'm going through the asphalt. Okay, so again, he addressed that issue about fire trucks
There's no more
and
asphalt.
the proper grading of this. And that corner right there, what he's talking, that is the north,
There's the fire hydrant right there.
and there's the hydrant, and the slope coming onto it, and the drainage is all in there. So this is addressing a much bigger issue, and I would rather we do it right, not have the litigation, as you say, and you know what, somebody's pushed you to that building, let's just say, let's do it right. And we are doing it right in the timeline, I agree with you, but to your address, that 3-inch water main is less than 6 inches under the ground. That horrifies me. I put a master valve on there so that people don't drive on it and break it. I've already informed the contractors about that. So with the master valve on there, when that clocks off, there's no water on that back property. And we have not turned the water on that back property all year. And it still looks green like that because of the water table. Okay, so your point is well said. There is a whole other story there. And it does need to be addressed. And maybe that's why they only went 6 inches, is so they wouldn't hit that water table. But I am grateful, Adam, for you and Alan to address the bigger issue. But I would rather that you take the time and follow the process so we don't get all caught up in litigation. I agree with the work that I've seen, that they're doing great work. But Kevin, I don't want to see somebody opportunistic saying that we can do something better and double the price of whatever they're going to do. So drainage, a good base, fire truck can actually drive on it, that's worth the wait. Because the last time this was done, they just put another one of those coats on there. The guy hadn't even got off the property because it was the day before school and the teachers were already driving on it to get to their classrooms. So,
Bill. Thanks, Chuck.
Yeah, great briefing, thank you. I learned a lot. Just by way of history, I used to manage large capital projects in Louisiana, so I know a lot about water and soil. Just a couple comments. One thing I always tried to emphasize when we ran into these kind of issues and when I, in my management past, and at the city too, is learn from the experience. Unforeseen condition. There might be some ways of having it not have been such an unforeseen condition in the future. For example, I didn't hear about any core sampling being done prior to the bid process to stipulate the scope of the project. This is something we felt we've run into with the streets, where not enough adequate front-end core sampling to actually know the subsurface condition prior to going out to bid. There's also stipulations you can have where the contractors have to take on some of the responsibilities for the core sampling and field conditions. This is probably an extreme example, but I just wanted to point out that there probably is some things to learn from in terms of the procedures in the future. And also to acknowledge that a lot of our schools are built in low flat areas, which means people forget. There's a lot of wetlands in this valley. We have a wetland here. And we need to be thinking about managing the wetlands differently sometimes from just how to, compact them and cap them. We also need, there's a lot of, I think I would argue that maybe think about some subsurface drainage issues at the various school properties going forward. So, yeah, I'm not speaking against what you're having to do. You're up against it. It's an urgency. But I would ask you to think seriously about maybe doing some core samplings in the future before stipulating these bid specs.
It's actually already on for next summer because we do have
TOPA, Miners Oaks, and Patola. So we have learned from this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if
Yeah.
you deny this public policy exemption, then we will move forward with the formal or informal bid process. You don't have to vote on that. You would deny this, and then we will bring that bid back to you, or the proposal, the winning bid back to you for approval, which would also, by the way, probably mean a special board meeting.
So if we do that, the best estimate is it'll disrupt the first couple of weeks of class?
Yeah, we backwards mapped all the time today.
Yeah, we went backwards, and yeah, we're looking at least 2 weeks of work just to get it back to where we can get ready to pave it again. So
More than 2 weeks.
So I
Yeah.
would say, if we approve it, say at the August 14th board meeting, let's say, I would figure 3 to 4 weeks of work still. So we're looking at
A month, probably.
Which is hugely disruptive for kids, their first month of school,
There's no place to go.
with no place to go.
And for a formal bid process, what's the timeline again, if we wanted, if we
2
said-
weeks, basically.
14 days, it's 10 days for, it's 10 days, and when we mapped out the formal bid process, it would fall, essentially, approval would fall right on our next scheduled board meeting. If we do informal, which saves us 4 days, we would have to have a special board meeting, or just wait, in which case, we might as well do the
Right.
So,
Right.
you know, this seems like it could get really complicated. So if we were to go through a bid process, find a different contractor to do the new work, then presumably this contractor would be off the job for a while.
Yeah.
Then a bunch of new work would happen, then there would have to be some subjective notion of when they start again based on their original bid. Because obviously the original bid left us with a perfectly paved condition. So
Right.
obviously we want to get the value from that. We're not going to just have somebody else take over and finish it. So there's going to be an
Right.
iterative
which is
takeover.
why
Yeah.
we went with this public policy exemption, because we feel it's really truly an extension of the same project, given that kind of break in scope, that if you had two contractors having someone do this work in the middle, then having the original contractor come back and do the paving is problematic.
And, I mean, we're required to take the low bid, correct?
Yes.
So,
I mean,
let's say
or
somebody
not
else
say
bids
this.
and they're lower, but they're not available until October. I mean, who says they're available to start the next day?
Right.
Right, all right.
Well, in the bidding process, when we would do the job walk, we would state that
Can you
it needs to
Required
start
that?
right away.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm inclined to go ahead with the public policy exemption.
Is that a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous.
All right.
The
Thanks,
kids,
guys.
the first day of school, thank you.
All right.
After the white.
We'll be out there tomorrow.
Yeah.
Our priority is the kids.
The other issue though with that playground is the shade. I'm always looking at shade issues and there's no shade out there. I think that needs to be discussed at some point.
Yes.
Adam,
Shade,
Trees would
shade
be-
structure.
my usual joke, Canadian, right?
Yes, Canadian.
Good.
All right, thank you.
And thank you, Adam, for meeting me out there today.
And Alan, by the way, is on vacation today. I told him this was a totally simple issue, and that he could indeed go do wedding or whatever he was doing with his family, and he was grateful to,
All right.
but sends his regards.
7.4.6, Stephen Wolf.
All right, so this is, David is going to come up and give some information.
Do we want to do
about-
the information first or the comment first?
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm Steve Wolf from Docu Products, president of Docu Products, and this is Tracy Rain. She's the account manager here, and we've been the vendor for the school district for 10 years now. Tracy's a member of the community, and our office is in Ventura. We're very dedicated to the Ojai area. We've got a lot of customers here, got a lot of service technicians here, and we've been doing an excellent job as far as our feedback is with the district thus far. We've worked very closely with David Rogers over the past few years. We've had a great working relationship. In fact, on June 20th, we went into his office, we spoke to him about this exact thing, the copiers being up for RFP. And Dave informed us that there was gonna be a process where he didn't get pricing. And with that pricing, he was going to talk to us and speak to us and come up with a plan. He thought that his comment to us was, if your pricing's in line with everybody else, I see no reason why that you guys wouldn't move forward with you, because you guys done an excellent job here at the district. I mean, unforeseen, who knows exactly what happened, but that's where we left off on June 20th. So since then, Tracy's been trying to get a hold of Dave and contacting Dave, and we've kind of like had a little bit of trouble getting more information, because we know this has been kind of coming up and creeping up on us. So we responded to a bid by this company, Optimizon, who I guess prepared the bid for the district for the office equipment. And we have some comments on the results of the bid, and some of them are logistical, and some of them are financial. So I'll start with the logistical first. And one of the responses to the bid from another vendor was that the toner supply was a 3 to 5 day window for delivery of toner. And we know for a fact that even Kathy has needed toner before, and Tracy has left the office and delivered toner to Kathy at 8 o'clock in the morning, met her out front in her car. So to us, to a school, 3 to 5 days for a district office without a toner supply seems like kind of not our model. Let's just put it that way. So I guess the penalty that they said that they agreed to on the response through Optimizon was a $5 penalty. For us, we believe that the penalty is much greater. Tracy has kids that went to this district. We know how important these copiers are to the teachers. So the other portion that was interesting to us is the response time. And they stated that a response time to the district was 8 hours. 8 hours can mean if you call in for service at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you might not see a technician the next day. Today, if the district calls us for service and says we have a machine at Nordhoff that's down, and David, the principal, calls, or anybody calls, oh, my time's up. I'll go a little faster.
You can go a little.
I'll go a little faster. We'll drive it over. Tracy. We're talking about service. So the service connection, our response time is immediate if you guys are down, but our average here at the district is 2 hours. So if you call us at noon, we'll be here before teachers are off at the end of the day, and they'll be running their copies before the end of the day for the next school day. Other part of this is there's other parts, lots of other parts. One of the parts was that if the machine was inoperable, we offered to replace the machine. I think the other vendor offered to replace the machine as well. But let's get into some of the financial stuff, because I guess we've been here since 5:30, and I think like that's a really important part of the district. If you look at the response from our total monthly cost according to Optimizon, we came in at the lowest price at $302,229, and the next vendor was at $309,404 for their proposal. Some additional costs that we feel that weren't expressed from their side that were expressed on our side were things like the hard drives need to be removed from the copiers. If you remove the hard drives from the copiers and don't put new hard drives back in and format them to the Canon devices, when you return them to the leasing company won't accept them back. In addition to that, we're paying for shipping back. Their proposal was to dispose of the machines, which they can't be disposed of. They need to be returned to the leasing company, which is an expense to the district that wasn't accounted for in other people's their response. Some other costs that were in here is we included staples. It seems like a minor thing, but we added up our staple costs, and it was over $4,000 in staples, and those are included in our quote. And their staple prices were much higher, as they stated in here, than ours were over the prior period. But ours are included in the new period. And let's see. I think those were the main things that we wanted to say. There's a performance bond that was part of the bid. We've also agreed to give the district a performance bond, which would mean that if there was a problem, then we'd be responsible for replacing, $75,000 worth of copiers if there was an issue with our performance toward the district on that device. So I think with our proven track record, and also we feel like we missed the opportunity to go back to Dave and say, Dave, we know the district. Here's some things we can do. Here's some additional software that we feel could be of benefit. Here's what all these principals have said to us. Here's more about our relationship with the schools. So we never got that opportunity. So anyway, we just wanted to express how we felt about it. I don't know if you have anything you want to add. We have a,
You know what, I would like to add a little bit. Good evening. I know a few of you. Tiffany, welcome to the school district. I haven't had the opportunity to meet you, but I hope to see you at some community thing.
I'll be there.
Kevin, you know what I will say to you, I echo the piece about Ojai being a special place, that it is. I personally, I just have to kind of throw this in, just because I'm very passionate about it. I grew up here myself, left for college, like many of us do, living in a small town. We go, okay, there's got to be more to this than this small town that's very isolated, actually they're insulated, and we want to go out and experience the world, which I did, but then quality of life becomes very important, and then it becomes like, oh my gosh, what can I possibly do to move back here and make a living and be part of this community? So it's a fine, so my point is, I went through this school district myself, as did both my children. I actually was an original OEF member here for Ojai Unified. And I'm very familiar with Measure J because I reside here. I think the biggest piece for me is that this whole process was extremely confusing for a partnership that we have had for 10 years. And more than anything, I really want what's best for this district. And this decision that came so quickly with no participation other than, we had a meeting on the 20th, we're told one thing, and none of that is what came to play. We've reached out. We even did send a letter because this came very quickly. We sent a letter yesterday, as the T's and C's did stay to do, and even today had no acknowledgement. So I'm just utterly confused about this whole process, and we came in as the lowest bidder. Pricing was incredibly sharp. But the other criteria percentages of how they came to this decision, have no idea. I have no idea what those are. They're not posted. They've not been shared. So what exactly was that gauged on? So my request is to just put this on, slow the brakes. Really do, a fair analysis of how this has come to play. The district paid $5,000 for this Optimism company, to which these are all basic things that we do for free. We're a major player in this community, the largest dealership between Santa Maria and Orange County. So with school districts and hospitals and resorts and, but this just doesn't sit right. So, the additional things that go above and beyond, David, I think you would agree. We have put machines for free. Just because I'll say to Steve, they need it. This district has no money. I remember my son not even having a desk at Nordhoff. So I get it. But up to this point, and what's on the table right now, just doesn't make sense. So, and it just isn't right for the district. And so I really urge this to be looked at more and in depth. And You know, David, it's been great working with you. He's a really nice guy. I don't understand our meeting on the 20th and all the recaps I've done since then based on our meeting. This is what I heard, this is what you said, this is what, and nothing back. I don't know. You know what? I work for a company that's extremely transparent with a president and owner that just does right by clients, period. So, thanks for your time.
Thank you. All right, Tiffany, David,
Sure. So I will start, and I will say that, and David can correct me, because this was before my time, and in some, as you've seen tonight, in some cases, I'm trying to come up to speed with things and how they kind of came to play before I was here. But Optimizon was selected as a kind of neutral third-party company to look at our usage across the district, to look at our contract and see kind of what we were, if we had machines in the right place and what our usage was. This kind of coincides broadly with a policy to move away from, and I believe I sent that to you last night.
yeah, we all saw this.
Yeah. So broadly coincides with the policy to move away from individual printers in classrooms because they're not cost efficient or effective in terms of having them and repair and linking them to the network and replacing ink cartridges. So this was strategically selected as part of that. As we move away from classroom printers, we have to make sure that our copy machines have the capacity to serve our teachers, or that's not gonna be good for anyone. So, David, do you want to talk a little bit more about the process and Optimizon and Optimizon? Saying it wrong? Sorry. I've only read it.
Yeah, as Tiffany stated, Optimizon really was brought in as a neutral third party to assess what we already have, and Tracy has been fantastic about meeting and discussing long-term goals and projects. And I think part of your confusion is simply that I often engage with contractors to discuss possibilities. So I will meet with Dave from California Electric probably twice a week, and he never gets any business from me, but he will happily walk and say, like with this paving project, these guys are way high, they're way low, I could do it for this much, that much. So Optimizon really took a look at everything that we were doing, excuse me, as a district with our goals in mind. So they took into account FTE, student populations, and they calculated out like how much capacity we should have on these certain machines in these certain areas, and looked at heat maps as well. If there's this bank of classrooms at Nordhoff, we had decided to go from 2 copiers at Nordhoff to 5, for example, but they're smaller than the current one in one area. So there's strategies and things like that that I myself am not, fully versed in, and they do this for school districts all over California and all over other states as well. So that was really why we brought them in.
And they ran the RFP process as well.
They ran the RFP process as well, met with all the companies, answered all the questions, and that's also one thing that we were told from them is not to answer direct questions. And so the July 20th meeting actually should have never happened, and I requested that it didn't happen. And I was told I really needed to make that happen to try and extend an olive branch and make sure that they were fully understanding the process. But it really was communicated effectively in the front from Optimizon. Here are the breakdowns of where 25% on pricing, 25% on term, or 40% on terms and conditions. All of those things were broken down and fully understood by every other contractor. So I really regret that we ever had that meeting, just because I knew that something like this could happen from it.
So to clarify, and I just want to make this, I want to understand for myself.
Sure.
That because I've seen the percentage breakdown of what, price is this much, whatever. That was clearly stated in the RFP?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
the results were not.
I could find out if the results can be posted. I'd be happy
We
to share
generally,
them if,
the
but we
cover
don't.
sheet,
Yeah.
but we have not made the results of the RFP and
Okay.
the scoring
Yeah.
process, that doesn't need to be made
So our pricing
public.
was
Right.
the lowest, but we don't know where anything else stacked.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to understand, as you guys can imagine, this is not an issue that typically comes before us. I mean, I've been on the school board for more than the 5 years that I assume some other contract was entered. I don't think
I think sometimes
maybe
these are
maybe
even
it was
on
in
the consent calendar.
Yeah, it would be, I guess, on the consent calendar. But what is the latitude we have when it comes to non-price considerations in an RFP? I mean, we were just talking about the
Right.
fact that there are
Right.
certain environments where we
Yeah.
have to take the low bid.
So in this case, it was stated up front and clearly that it is weighted on 25%, 25, 40, and 10. And I have that breakdown right here. 25% pricing, 25% equipment configuration, 40% terms and condition, and 10% of vendor's ability to meet the needs of the district. So, and that one, for myself, I weighed heavily, just in, discussing things with Optimizon was, technician count and response times. It was brought up the 8-hour response time. We've had issues in the past with multi-week response times, and so that really did, that's why it was weighted 10%. And so it was all stated up front.
So the top scoring out of all of those weighted considerations, out of all of the RFPs that were submitted, the top scoring proposal was Image Source. So that's the agreement that we're bringing to you today, is Image Source's agreement, and you can see, I believe, I don't have it in my packet,
It's a
but there was
$7,000 disparity
right,
between the two.
but just on price, but
Right.
the total scoring was, I believe, in the cover sheet that came with your,
Yeah.
came with your board packet.
Yeah.
How did, so each company was asked to rate themselves on response time?
Optimizon actually rated all of them based on industry standard response times, and I would love to show you the Excel document because it's massive.
They
And I
actually have seen it.
Okay,
I sent
yeah,
it to them last
it's, incredibly multifaceted, and part of building that was, actually using industry standards, not just subjective materials or biases that I myself would impart on the document. And that's really why it was, I think, the best interest to have a neutral third party, and the decision was not entered in solely by myself.
Was past performance part of the Optimizon review? So whatever good or bad things
I want to speak
from DocuProducts?
Yeah, it
in
was
the
mostly,
past?
so it's vendor's ability to meet the needs of the district. So past performance really wasn't weighted in there. And the past performance has been great. So, only recently had we started to have some issues, and then because we're coming towards the end of the lease, we really didn't want to bring those up, argue them. If summer was here, we could discuss them if they won, that sort of thing. And so really, this came from a training that I went to about RFPs, and we thought, wow, we actually should be doing a complete RFP process for a contract this large, $300,000. So
Because I've heard past performance has been great, but then I've also heard that there have been some serious issues.
I really don't want this to turn into mudslinging or anything like that. In my opinion,
We're totally open to hear,
I understand.
If there've been past performance issues, I'd really like to know, because I'm really not, please.
Yeah,
Past performance wasn't consideration. It can be used
Yeah.
if you have bids and you would like to select not the lowest bidder.
Mhm.
You can use past performance as an indicator. However, we
Yeah.
are basing this particular recommendation based on the scoring that was based on the rubric that came from the RFP that Optimizon did after looking at all of those
Right,
preset.
and that was the reason for the
conditions.
question, that the
Yeah.
Optimizon scoring did not
It did not include past performance. But that has been a consideration of why we would even also want to enter into an RFP and just see what options are out there and what other companies exist. Honestly, every time I look at any software, I look at 3 to 5, possibly 10 different ones and weigh all the pros and cons, and so this was no different.
Does Optimizon provide this service in other categories than these services?
They are 100% copier RFPs. That is what they do, and the experience working with them was fantastic.
And so for future RFPs in other areas, you would presumably find some similar company because based on your training that you now want to use this process?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, we typically will look for a company that specializes for RFPs. So when we did the architect RFP for when I was interim bond manager for 2 years or however long that was, same process. And we didn't end up picking the cheapest, and Kevin, you were a big part of those discussions when we did select R&T, so.
All right.
Yeah, that kind of same considerations is ability to meet district's needs, pricing is absolutely important, and then really terms and conditions.
As far as terms, I've been doing this for 30 years, I've never heard 8 hours service response time as an industry standard or 5 days for towing, ever. So this is like something that it should be just totally tolerable for a term, I think.
So again, it's not necessarily that is an industry standard, it's weighted, so they scored lower than you in that capacity, absolutely. So
that shouldn't be acceptable.
So we're looking at the overall score.
We don't want to get into a back and forth.
That's exactly it, yeah. It's not that. There were other performance issues, and again, I do not want to turn this into a mudslinging fest. I'm already way out of my comfort zone with what I've been having to put up with.
So let me
twisting of words.
address the time frame issue.
Yes.
So we were hoping our agreement ends soon, July 31st. The reason that this is coming up and the reason that this is coming up tonight is because, this was a surprise to me, but is so that we can potentially have new copy machines before school starts.
Yep.
If we don't have them in place when school starts, there are a couple of things that really fire teachers up. Not having copy machines, I'm sure Angie can attest to that, is something we don't want to do. So, or having them changing over in the middle of the school year or during school times. So if you don't want to approve this recommendation and you want us to go back to the RFP process, I mean, I think at this point we would have to reopen
We'd have to redo the entire
RFP
absolutely.
process and rescore and potentially go back to optimize on for another round. I don't know what that would look like.
Yeah.
And then we would recommend not doing anything until either November break, winter break, spring break, or next year. But having to time it. So it's here to you today because of the timing issue with the start of school.
And what happens if the contract ends at the end of the month? Until
They go month to month, so we can just keep things as they are.
I will know that this contract overall saves about $100,000 over 5 years from where we are currently. So overall, that's good news for us.
Yeah.
How does that work if they're not the lowest bid? How does
Well, the contract saves over where they currently are, Jane, because we're at the end of the 5 years. So the cost per copy and the service is.
Machines are cheaper, things
increases
have changed.
as the machines are at the very tail end. So of course, the bid that is the lowest also would have even greater savings. Because you're starting all new. You're
Over
starting
5 years.
fresh with brand new equipment, very low cost per copies, you're starting at the very beginning. But the cost savings is even a little bit askew too, because as what Steve pointed out, I mean, there's stable factors of $4,000, the return on the machines is not factored in there, and that's pricey.
So I believe all that is actually factored into the RFP process, and if you'd like, we can go through the Excel sheet with every line by line, but
Well, it seems to me I'm not hearing a process problem. And I'm not prepared tonight to sit and listen to one bidder argue about the process unless all bidders have that opportunity. And so I understand the frustration of losing a $300,000 contract after 10 years, absolutely. But what I'm hearing is that we took a neutral third party to administer this process, and that I'm not hearing any particular violation of the process as it was intended to be. What I'm hearing is that one of the vendors does not understand or agree with the scoring of their bid, and I don't expect them to necessarily, right? I mean, I never agreed with any of the Ds I got in school, so I understand that. I am a little bit disturbed that there's this, unless I'm misunderstanding it, an implication that some conversations with our staff led to some potential certainty of outcome. I think, any kind of conversation that David may have, David is a staff member, he's not the board, and anyone who would infer that anything that he said was a commitment by the district would be naive and misinformed. And so I think it's irresponsible to hold David responsible for trying to manage good vendor relations. So at this point, I have not really heard anything that says that the process of making this decision was flawed. And so I'm prepared to support this.
Is that a motion?
Yes, I'll move to.
Before we
Yeah.
move, so, I think, I mean, I'm having a very hard time. You know, Tracy, her daughter was in my son's class, I've known her for years. Full disclosure, the academy uses DocuProducts for its copy machines. So, you know, and maybe I'll recuse myself here. We do have a relationship, and then I really trust David. I've seen him do a lot of work, I've seen him advance in work, so I'm in a position of, I don't know, doesn't make sense to me, right? Two valuable, good people that have a disagreement, I don't know, in this situation, how I put myself in the middle of it. So that's just.
And what I would say, Jade, is this is the scoring, this is the top scoring from the RFP process. That's what we've brought you.
I would just say, and echo Mike's issue, I think from a board perspective, you have to look at process. I mean, that's where I'm focused as well. I applaud you, David, for using a system that you think is an objective one and following a process that you think is going to lead to better outcomes. And I want to empower you to do that. And unless there's some, frailty in the process, like as Michael said, it seems to me that I want to empower you to be able to see it through. So I also support it on that basis. It's used a third party. They used objective criteria. They came to their conclusion, and you're asking us to approve it. I think we approve it.
Thank you.
And it seems to me that our options are go back to the third party, and I'm not sure how, to do what, I'm not sure what that means. If we were to hold off on this and come back to it and ask Optimizon to re-look at everything, I don't know what other criterion they would be looking at, so that, I don't understand that idea, really. Can somebody shed light? Is there some
I think,
other-
we could ask them to weight different factors, separately to win a certain company.
We could redo
that
the
we-
entire
But that's,
RFP
to me,
process.
that seems,
But my understanding is that when you began this RFP process, every vendor understood what criterion were being
weighted.
weighted
Or at
and
least
what
they
were
were
being
told.
looked at.
Yeah,
Some of it was
absolutely.
subjective though, right? It wasn't all based on.
That was the whole point of the process, was
So-
none of it
so
was
the part about
basically
the-
subjective.
The part about the 8-hour response, that was not.
So-
Those aren't optimization numbers.
No, that's correct. They're not their numbers, no. So in that category would score a 1, and so you scored a 1, and someone who has an 8-hour response time scores a 0.5. But if you notice, that's a 680-point score, right? 686, I think, was the top score. So that's one small factor in a myriad of performance metrics and things.
That's not a number, I'm sorry, you're right. That's just not a number that's not a number that
Right.
works for a school district.
Well,
That's
I've
not-
won and lost a lot of things in my life, and it never feels good to lose, even if you don't like the system. My kids have played a lot of sports. I haven't liked a lot of calls from refs. Very rarely have I really got upset about it, but I've been upset.
Thane, this is a really fine line for me, and I almost said, you know what, I'm gonna not even come, because I am here.
Right.
And, I do know Jane, but, when I simply tell you, this just isn't, as it is right now, is not a good thing for the district. If you run the numbers, I say that, very, very sincerely and very honestly.
I'm not upset that you came.
Yeah,
I'm
but
glad that you
But I
came.
just want you to know, this was the kind of on the fence I had of like, don't be a sore loser, it is not that. I'm telling you, these numbers and this solution is not good for the school district. Period.
Right. And,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's your opinion,
Yeah.
and, yeah, and thank you. Yeah.
Can I ask one other question about Optimize on is how they were chosen and what do we know about
They were
the quality of their work?
Yeah, they were chosen from asking all the school districts around us who they used for their RFP process, and then we chose the best one that fit our needs. And they're a little bit smaller team, but they were very accessible, and so we didn't want to get stuck with our timelines for the summer. That was really the goal, was the copier contract coming up this summer. We needed to start the RFP process in time to get copiers in the summer. So, yeah, Optimizon was recommended by Oxnard District, and there's two others, but Maggie was really essential in figuring that out once we deemed that we really did want to go down an RFP process route.
I'll move to approve the contract.
Well, I think Mike already did.
Okay, second?
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm gonna abstain.
Aye.
Aye. So that'll be 4-1. Oh, no. 4 with an
0-0.
abstention. Yeah.
But I am saddened
Yeah.
by the loss of a
Yeah,
relationship.
thank you for all your
Yeah.
great work.
I would have really been happy for a lot of reasons to keep you on board, but I feel that we had a process and we should follow the process. So, thank you. All right. Moving to 7.5.1.
David is actually going to stay up there. Do you want me to run the tech? Okay. I can do it for you. So this item, I'll introduce this item. I mentioned last week, as we look at some boardroom upgrades, including chairs. Last week you approved the blinds. And if we are going to redo some of the pieces of the boardroom, it makes sense to look at the tech. If we're looking at the tech, it makes sense to look at, do you want live streaming capability or not? So since Kevin brought this up at the last meeting and we had already been working on it, I asked David to present it tonight since we will likely be doing some changes. So this is both about the live streaming capability and if you want to do that, and also about specific technology suggestions that we have for this room, just for you to consider, kind of holistically.
All right, so the discussion of live streaming capability. So we have the infrastructure, equipment, and capability to live stream on YouTube. We would need a technician available to operate OBS Studio. It's an open source product that we use for live streaming. Provide transitions and monitor audio levels. The transitions would be really nice if you guys go to breaks. The board meeting will start soon. I'm sure we've all kind of seen like a live stream that has these little like cards that come up. So that's kind of nice. It just really makes it look nice and professional, especially when you are streaming live. We need to make minor adjustments to the setup in the room, and I have a little picture that Jesse, I think, hurriedly made for me that had some ideas of where we would put those objects. The technician can also provide support to presenters. I think there's sometimes meetings where someone needs a little help or the projector doesn't come on, and so I think that could be really useful. So. We also are discussing audio improvements. We've all heard about the microphones and the audio that we get on our live streams or on our current YouTube videos. So we looked up, found a Behringer Eurorack. It's a $200 soundboard that would replace the one we have in the back. MX418 gooseneck mics, some basses, about $2,600 all in all. It's quite an expense, but the audio would be much improved. And I believe that's 9, so I counted 8, and then we'd have 9 if we have our student presenter, and then the podium itself as well.
And David, would you have the ability to turn that mic on and off, unlike our current ones?
So if we had a technician in the back, yes, and that would improve the audio considerably. One modification to this is the Behringer soundboard is about $245, I believe. There's a $1,400 option, which is auto mic. And that's really the wave of the future, where it'll listen to your mic, turn it off when you're not talking, and as soon as you start talking, it clicks right back on. Might be a little Gucci for us.
Into the future?
Well,
we're not used to that around here.
It's a $1,200 disparity between the two soundboards, and if we could, have someone just hit the button, do we need that? I really
So it's
think
not the ones they have at the city where you reach and turn it on and off yourself?
we could do something like that as well. I didn't specify that. But that is an option, yeah, we could definitely look into that as well.
Does that eliminate the need for a technician?
It would, except if we're gonna live stream, they'd still need to be there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's kinda,
And I would say,
We could piecemeal it.
I watch a lot of school board meetings online, live stream school board meetings, and having a technician is really key. So if, like the Oxnard Union board meetings are forever not working, and I text somebody to say it's not working, or I can't hear, or PS the mics are on during the break, whatever. So having an actual person there is really nice.
yeah.
And we've worked out potentially some ways to do that and some schedules, options.
Yeah, I discussed it with our techs, and they would be open to like a little round robin of, you know, each one gets a little overtime type
I've always
thing.
wondered too about the video class at Nordhoff.
We've tried it several times. Jake Hansen would be the first to tell you, it just comes down to the initiative of one student or maybe two that really want to do it. And so if you know anyone who might be interested, I mean, that could be extra credit or something, you know.
It's just
I would
difficult
love
with
that.
consistency, and as you know, kids have all kinds of schedule things, and so it might be
Yeah.
something where we would have them participate as interns, but we would probably still want an adult
Yeah,
running
maybe-
it as a regular.
And maybe sometimes
Person.
they could
Yeah.
run it themselves,
Sure.
you know, on a, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Or work that way, you know, train them.
I'm just wondering with you here, who's going to be at home watching? Who cares?
My husband.
Bill, okay.
I watch my husband's meetings. I assume he'll watch mine.
I just, it struck me and I wanted to share with you that we all have, you know, you're a much bigger agency than the city. But we got some commonality. We have two new chief executives that we're both very happy with and optimistic about the future of our agencies. We have districting coming up. We have significant community interest issues. And I will tell you that we have some pretty good metrics that doing live streaming and also on top of what we've been doing for a long time in terms of over Channel 10 with the PEG money has really increased the eyeballs on the public process. I mean, it really has. We've actually, we've done some little surveys and we literally commonly have hundreds of people watching our meetings. And you may not, that may not be a positive. I mean, sometimes that's not necessarily a great thing, but it's really interesting at times. We'll be popping along and something will be coming up and maybe it's a little more controversial than people expected. It's a small town. People start coming in. You know, they've been watching and they want to get their public comment in. So I really think it's a significant issue in terms of if the goal is to increase public participation, it really matters, you know.
And I think the sound in particular, people
Yeah.
complain about our sound and it's bad.
Well, and also you PA in here with that darn air conditioning running.
Yeah.
You know, when some people are up here speaking very softly, they're really, it wouldn't be that much extra money to have a PA, would it? To have a little bit of speaker going on?
That would make it a little more complex for me, but yeah,
Okay,
we
well,
can do it.
I'm just saying it
I think
helps.
the biggest issue is the PZM mics that we currently use are based
Right.
on vibration. So that rattles the whole room whether you feel it or not, and
Right.
it gets picked up right there. It's
Exactly.
not necessarily that it's hearing it, it's that it's feeling it.
Right.
So.
And you know the video when you've been when you.
Yeah.
I don't know that you might think about amplification. There was someone speaking tonight that I had trouble hearing.
Yeah,
And
it's-
I think you're gonna be hard for people in the back to hear.
And that almost becomes an ADA thing too. You know, I'm getting older, and I notice it. Older people, hearing goes. There's an ADA access issue too, in terms of proper amplification, both in this room and online. And I would urge, maybe asking you or the superintendent to contact the city to see if we could maybe expansively look at lowering their costs by sharing some of the PEG infrastructure that we have.
Actually, we have one in the back.
Okay, but I mean, we might be able to. I'm just saying.
Yeah,
We are happy to
We
contact
have
the
new
city
people.
for money
Let's
savings.
talk.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, absolutely.
this meeting was more like a city meeting than most of our meetings.
Yeah.
They're very quiet and boring.
Well,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, and James from the city has helped me several times
Right.
in assessing what we really need to do here.
Yeah.
And so, he was
So-
big several months ago, I think, or it might even be a year ago when I talked to him about this, about having a technician.
Yeah.
And you guys have a technician.
We
in the
have,
back, so
maybe
it's
we could share or something, lower the cost, lower the
Great.
overhead.
I would love that.
Austin, did you get any numbers on your live stream tonight?
Yeah, it was between like 10 and 15 for most of the time.
Awesome, that's good for us.
We have that many in the room, so
Okay.
that's impressive.
Pretty good, yeah.
And now it's up on our page, so people can view
Right.
it whenever.
Fantastic. So also improvements with presentations. Jane, you sit there and you know full well that you have to move to see the presentations at times. And so we discussed putting in 2 monitors, maybe on that wall there, and then we could hang something from the ceiling here so that both halves of the room could see it, maybe equidistant so it looks decent.
So when you're at a city council meeting, you can actually see at home what they're looking at on the screen. That doesn't happen here.
Because you have a tech that does
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So what we would, we could do
second
that with
camera.
OBS Studio as well. However, our thought was if we actually migrate the camera to this side of the room, you'd very easily see the screen and the board, so we'd kind of zoom in a little bit more. So I think that could also take care of it. I'm open to either way.
I don't want to freak anybody out, but I just had this idea that we might eventually allow people to call in. Wouldn't that be awesome?
That speaker comment from
Yeah.
the speakerphone. Why not?
We would actually zoom in using video conferencing.
I mean, we do it all the time in court. In
Yeah.
court now, most of the time, if I have a perfunctory hearing, it's all court call.
Well,
You know, you look good if they zoom in. I look better when the camera's on.
Well, and
Famous president?
we also discussed maybe placing the monitor down in the horseshoe at an angle so that you would all see it, and then we'd have something here for the audience.
So VCOE has like, kind of a
Mhm.
counter,
Yeah.
and then you look
That way
at the
it doesn't
counter.
impede your view of the audience and ruin that, interpersonal relationship, but it would be visible, which is great too.
That's our photo area.
Well, and if you have
True,
a
we can move
counter,
it.
then people come up to the essentially kind of counter, and the podium is there. So
Right.
you're looking at them at the speakers while they're standing there instead of where they're talking to you.
And their presentation would be right below the podium. So yeah, I think it could be very cool. We could also make it portable. It wouldn't be hard to do, or movable, not portable. We also are going to set up an email, kind of a dedicated machine in the back so we can email presentations. I think that's a kind of a neat idea. So often I come in and have to log in really quick and grab my presentations down, and I think most of us do that. Flash drives are kind of becoming, obsolete, if I can dare say that, but I think that would help a lot. We could make presentation at OUSD.org, and that way it kind of flattens that gap of someone bringing in a MacBook or something else that they can't access it with. So so we kind of threw up some assorted cabling, dedicated computer. We have extras, little splitter box, some monitors, $700 each. So just some ideas. I'd love feedback on that one because I think it really needs to be kind of custom tailored to what you guys would want, not necessarily what technology has deemed appropriate. Just
And
feedback
costs.
on which one?
Mainly monitor locations. Like if you would like to see something down low, another one over on this side of the room, so that each half could could look at one monitor separately. Maybe we move the whiteboard over slightly and we put that one next to Cheryl a little bit. We can do a lot of cool things. So mount on this counter here, or mount up on the ceiling and hang down. So
Or you could have a screen that comes down over the blinds with a camera.
we could, yeah,
Like just a drop-down screen.
absolutely, yeah, because it is a difficult. Yes, exactly.
You can do anything with money.
Precisely, but in this case, we do get the 65-inch monitors for about $700 each, and then again, cabling, everything else, we're looking at less than $2,000, and so that could be possibly even a grant or some other, funding source. So. And we could do it one at a time too. This year we invest, $900, and next year we invest the other $900, and so at least we have a plan. That'd be great. So, those are some of the ideas. Monitor 1, monitor 2, whiteboard. That is a horseshoe. We currently have our display computer in the back corner, and we were thinking about putting the tech desk just as an extension out from that AC cabinet. The technician could sit behind.
I
The
love
camera
the
would be
sleeping
mounted.
area.
It's great, yeah. I work them hard. They need a nap every once in a while.
I thought somebody died.
So just a thought. I also wanted to discuss herbicide. Would now be a good time?
I was going to talk about that during the superintendent's report,
You
which is
got
right
it.
after this one.
Sounds good.
What
Thank you.
is the cost of having a technician be here?
We could get those exact numbers.
Because it's not just tech, we're talking.
Well, we have some ideas about potentially scheduling, right, so it becomes
Mhm.
part of their job.
Yeah.
So we don't necessarily have to so we could pay overtime, or we could say, your job on these days, you come in at 10 and you come
Mhm.
till, you're here till 9, and then if we go past 9, you're probably paying overtime. But, we can
Yeah.
work it out with some scheduling options potentially. if-
Yeah. Flex things.
Yeah.
Come in at noon, that sort of thing.
Right.
And then that's adding to a workload, so I'm assuming we're taking away somewhere as well.
There will be something that doesn't get done that day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, I just really want to say that I think this is a long time coming and that we really do need to do this. I mean, we need to become
Something.
available in real time with, video that shows people's faces and that you can hear.
That you can hear, yeah.
Are we ready to approve a plan?
I don't think it's an action item, right?
It really is kind of information, and if
Yeah.
you say, go forth and make a
It
plan.
says potentially.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if you guys wanted the push button microphones, I'd love to know what your feedback is, and I can provide far more sharp pricing and make sure it's.
I don't think we need to vote on receiving information
No.
again, but if we want to move forward with the plan,
Or if you want us to, this could be like first reading, and we can come back with a further detailed plan based on kind of your thoughts and
I would
feelings
prefer
tonight.
that.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not-
I would like to see a plan.
Okay.
I think it's time. I think, we sit at these meetings and we wonder why nobody knows what we're doing. And
Yeah.
even tonight, why nobody knew what our scores were that we talked about 6 months ago. So I think the more we can do to get people on board, the better.
So kind of the decision tonight was, because we can redo the audio really easily, but the question was, do you want us to proceed with a plan for live streaming as well, or just a plan for upgrading the audio?
Well, my position's obvious.
And you were just live streaming.
I'm not opposed to it. I don't have strong feelings one way or the other, to be honest,
As
but
long as you're always shooting my good side.
that's right.
Then I'm fine.
That can be part of the plan.
Thank you.
I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other. Not opposed, but I,
Right.
if it really makes us more people involved, I'd love it, but I have my doubts.
You'll get more eyeballs, I assure you.
Well, we're not, well, I'm not going to use a sports analogy because
But I think-
I'll just get myself into trouble, but, right. Fewer people watch some sports than basketball, right, so.
And I think there's an element.
You're the basketball in town.
Or the golf channel.
We're ESPN2, they're ESPN.
We can also set up live streams ahead of time, and that's really something that, like, if you're branding, marketing, getting information out before it even happens. So when the agenda goes out on Friday, we can set up our live stream, and it'll actually, if you're subscribed to our channel on YouTube, you'll see that, like, hey, a live stream's coming up Tuesday at 6 o'clock, 5:30, and I think that might get more people to be engaged and to remember. It's a little bit of a reminder that something is coming up that you want to see. And then if you sit down at night and you do pop on YouTube and we are live streaming, it might be 10 minutes into the meeting, but it's gonna prioritize that on your dashboard. So, and that, I think that is a way a lot of people now with like Roku's taking over cable, like YouTube is huge right now, and so I think you'll see it. Even if your kids pull it up on YouTube to watch something else, and the live meeting today, you pull it up on your phone, you can watch it. So.
I think I mentioned, I've actually watched the city council, and then when it gets to the thing that I'm interested in, gone down.
Yeah.
Chuck, you had a,
With the technology piece, I'm wondering about how we deal with the second language. Because a lot of times when you have a hot potato issue, we get the talking interpretation going on. It's more difficult. Can this be incorporated at the time of this technology?
So
The answer is yes.
Oxnard does concurrent translation
Yeah.
during their live stream, so they have a translator that they pay to sit in the back of the room, and they actually have 2 channels. They have an
Yeah.
English channel and a Spanish channel.
We've talked about that before.
Yeah.
Issues.
That's phase 2 of this plan.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know if it was married this time, the technology or software thing.
Having done several live streams myself, one live stream is enough for one person to truly be tuned into and to be paying attention to and making sure it's running. 2 for one person would be very hard to manage, especially set up, miking everybody, get all. But yes, it's possible. It's absolutely possible.
so should we plan to get I think there's a consensus that we might want to go forward with it. Can we get more information?
I'd like to see the plan and the cost
Cost breakdown.
between the two, to live stream versus non. I'd like to see.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So with regards to audio improvements, this is why I really did want to speak to the board. You guys mentioned the ability to turn on and off your own mic. That, they do have an auto mixer that would do that. It is more expensive, but it really takes off the need for you to handle one more thing during the meeting. If you guys want the button, that's a cost savings, but then it's one more thing you guys have to do. So
We're pretty busy here.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. We're not busy
It's
at
all
all.
it's all part of the discussion.
Control
and
person, I would
It's my nature to bring up every
Yeah.
possible avenue and then let people choose.
But we're not going to be good at it, probably. I'm not going to be good at
Honestly,
turning it
even
off.
30% would help. Like the less mics in a room, the better. So even if just a couple people utilized it, it would help the audio. And having mics close to your mouth, it's going to be a whole new world of audio for you guys. So.
Yeah.
Well, I think if we were gonna have the on and off, we would want at least a low-level PA, because I think that's what, kicks you in, like, oh, I'm not on. Otherwise, we're not gonna have any idea.
Yeah, and I apologize actually for saying that PA is difficult. I was really thinking with these, and so these actually are impossible to PA because they work on vibration, so it'll just instantly feedback. If we do the gooseneck mics, PAs are easy, and I could build a PA solution for under $100 probably, so that wouldn't be hard to do.
And unrelated, but you're mentioning the PR element, it'd be nice to get us on Ojai Hub. City Council is on that. It's a website that every Friday and Thursday.
We can do that.
is in.
No problem.
Okay, yeah.
It's just every Thursday I get an email and
Oh,
says
yeah.
this is what's happening in the next 7 days. It's like from the paper, but it's an email.
It's actually,
Oh, cool.
no problem, we can do that.
Sweet.
All right.
All right.
Good.
I'll come back
Thank
with
you.
more info.
Very good. Superintendent's
Right,
report.
I'm actually gonna have David stay up here just for that last, so, this is not an action item, but I just wanted to share with you, as part of the superintendent's report, that we have a weed issue. We know we have a weed issue, and because we have to hand weed, and that we don't have the person power to do that hand weeding. So we are going to be piloting an herbicide option, but I wanted to tell you in advance so that when you see people walking around with the spray cans, that they are not spraying toxic chemicals. And I wanted to say it publicly for the viewers at home, that we are using organic herbicide. So we're gonna have these, David made these great signs that are gonna be on the tanks that say organic herbicide in use. And that's essentially what it is. So I just wanted to share with you when you drive by and see people spraying and say, we banned that 10 years ago, that you did ban it, but we are trying another option so that we can not have to spend so many hours hand weeding, which doesn't work.
Matila's front is a great example. We put the weed block down. The weeds in Ohio are very special. They're very strong. They ripped right through it. So we need something that we can put on, and Chuck will tell you, maintain large swaths of area like the Miramonte track. Some of the areas we've xeriscaped or at least put wood chips down. Just be an extra help to put something on top. And so we did a lot of research and found, it's basically vinegar, soap, and salt. And it's
Which we're buying, we're not making it at home in our kitchens.
right. Yeah, we're not going to make our own. So we're actually using Green Gobbler's vinegar weed killer. So there's all the not very fun stuff, but no glyphosate, phosphates, sulfates, nothing like that. So
I've seen some ads for, because I've tried at home my own little vinegar.
Me too, yeah.
Doesn't work.
yeah, it's very tricky, and Chuck can tell you it's not there's timing involved. There's a lot to the complexity of like when plants have a lot of wax on their leaves or like the right times to apply. So it's not just go out there and spray all day long. It is going to be timed and thoughtful, but
Yeah,
we do
and
need
the
something.
sun, like you have to, like when the sun is at its hottest, so it
Yes.
absorbs, I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot to it that we're gonna have to figure out, and it's not gonna be easy, but we're gonna get it done. And I think it would really make a big difference in Chuck's day and Dave's day currently to free up some of those hours to work on the frontage of schools, which I think is much needed on a weekly basis. Just have that presentation element when people come in to really focus on that front. So
Thanks.
yeah.
So just information. Other information from me, we had our second Engage to Impact event. Thank you for coming. We had more people than we thought attend, which was great. We've had about 160 people so far attend the two. Our third one is on August 11, and that will be focused around creating a welcoming school environment. And so we'll have hopefully a similar kind of format where we'll have a video to share and watch together. We'll have hopefully a student panel. We're really looking this time at elementary, middle school potentially. And then they would go off to childcare, and then maybe a parent panel about welcoming school environments and what that means to them. And then having small group discussions and getting the feedback. The feedback from the last group was really interesting. I can't wait to give it to you. Somebody has to type it all up, and I haven't had time yet, but we're going to do that. So at the board retreat, you'll get feedback from all of those. We had a meet and greet last night that was put together by the Alliance, the Education Equity Alliance for Education Equity. It
Were
was
any other members here tonight? I was actually wondering, I thought.
Angie's a member.
Okay.
So it was great. They had the announcements in English and Spanish. They actually went out and door knocked over the weekend and handed out announcements in the Miners Oaks area. We had probably a dozen people show up over kind of the course. We had some great conversations with parents. We had translations, so we got to have some parents share their experiences in Spanish about what they've experienced. So that will also be part of the feedback that you get, kind of some overviews and lessons that we learned from that. Happy to do more of those. That was just a group that said we'd like to do this. So more meet and greets hopefully in the future. And then finally, you may have seen or heard, we're working on redoing the district logo. We have had a designer that worked with me at my old school who lives in Ojai, who's an Ojai resident, do some options. Actually, he's probably done 30 options for us at this point. We had an initial option that had the post office in it, and then somebody said we'd like to see an option with the bell from out front, because the post office represents the city and the bell represents the post office represents the city. Is there something else that represents the valley? So the artist came out and did a 3D rendering of the bell and turned it into a vector graphic and put it into a logo. So I think we're pretty close to narrowing down 3 possible choices, and then you'll see social media campaign, public voting, and then at some point we'll have an action item here to kind of vote on what we want. But trying to get as much stakeholder feedback and input as possible, narrowing down from like the 100 options, really 30. And everybody likes one of them, but some have some are clear favorites.
Is there a objective process for winning it down to the 3?
We've had the votes out so far at the 2 Engage to Impact events.
And it was here
and
last
people
week.
and it's been here
I saw
in
it
the hallway.
I saw it on that
Yeah.
when I was at the.
People put little dots out. There's some that are just not, like nobody's voted for them, and we agree. I don't like them. Nobody's like loving them. And then if people come back with specific modifications, like, oh, can you change this or that, or we've tried to do that, and so it's really been an iterative design process to get to these 3. One with the post office, one with the bell, and then one that's, I think, just Chief Peak. So
And
all
I
trying
noticed
to.
there was like last week, there was a comment, I like this one, but can you add the book that's in that one, you know, that kind of
Right,
thing?
and so without killing our designer, yes, we've been trying to accommodate those and then come up with new options and then revisit. So it's been a process, and it'll continue, but I wanted to let you know that was happening. That's kind of it for me.
Great. Board member reports, items for future agendas.
Well, in keeping with the ideas about volunteerism, I really mean it this time. You know, I'd like to maybe see if Nan Davis can come and make a presentation in the near future about, I think she's really on the verge of having something, and then Angie's organization, I think, has talked about also getting involved in the Alliance has talked about getting involved in the kind of getting people into classrooms to help. But I'd like to really try and bring that into some real focus.
That sounds great. We did have one meeting a couple years ago for a volunteer committee.
And if I could share, I had heard from some of our community folks that it's hard to volunteer, and that we maybe had different processes at each school for being a volunteer. So some schools made you have fingerprinting and some schools didn't, and it was, and that's a district level policy and district level implementation. You don't get to have a different policy at your school. So I checked in with Barbie, and I can see why potentially we had different interpretation of the rules, and it wasn't necessarily very clear. So we reached out to VCOE Risk Management. They have a matrix about different levels of volunteer and then what's required of those volunteers. We're working on adapting that to our information, making that clear, and then when we meet with the principals at the beginning of the year, we'll be rolling out kind of, this is the district policy for volunteers that we will all follow with fidelity. And then that will help, I think, with some of these issues, but some schools were easier to volunteer at than others at the end of the day.
But the type of activity is more, Nordoff Cleanup Day is different from
Right.
one-on-one tutoring with
Yes,
students.
and so we want to make sure that we protect kids, but also, getting fingerprinting is a financial barrier for some people. To say you have to pay $85 to go read to your kid in a classroom is potentially problematic if it's not required and the child is under supervision of a certificated teacher at all times. So just making sure that we understand those rules and that they're followed will be part. So I think working collectively will be great on that.
Well, you can imagine a situation where someone logs in, and based on their account, so to speak, they have certain level of privilege, and so they'll be pushed only the options that are within what they're
Well, maybe the
authorized.
family fund helps with that too.
Yeah.
Great.
We just need like $40,000
Yeah.
more than the 10 that we don't have, but yes.
Any other items?
I just wanted to compliment you on the event, the No Child Left Behind. I forgot the actual title.
Oh, the,
And being to impact.
Most likely to succeed.
Most likely to succeed, thank
Yeah,
you.
that one. I liked the movie was great, that was fabulous, but the conversation was really good. The opportunity to hear from students was superlative. And frankly, I think it's something we should do on a consistent and regular basis. I really like it. So that's just me.
Good. Yeah, me too. That's part of the, I have a whole plan to bring to you at the board retreat about how to continue with this engagement and how to have that. You saw that was one of our goals in the CSI, is really involving the community in our processes. And so you'll see some thoughts about how to continue to do that in a meaningful way.
Although I'll add, thanks to Jane's hard work on the ground over at Nordoff, I think this last year, having that student representative here was a real difference. And, and we had more of that at that event. But,
Well, and some of them were them. I mean, they were that
Right.
articulate, I think, not in small part because of some of this experience.
Yeah.
Actually have some thoughts about bringing students to board meetings for particular, like recognitions and things like that, so that we're engaging students and families more in this process that will come to you in the future.
In a positive way.
Oxnard has the cutest kid from each school read the Pledge of Allegiance and the mission statement at every single meeting.
How do they choose kids?
It's a nomination process. But there are ways that we can really put students at the focus of what we're doing and front and center. In fact, I was going to make coasters for your water bottles that have pictures of kids on them.
Blurred, of course.
No, real kids.
Just in terms of the future agenda, I had mentioned, talking again about Nordoff and you had mentioned that maybe you're talking about something in September, so I don't need to reiterate my.
About the AP classes? No, about
Semester long.
semester
Yeah,
long. So
I think it should be
yeah.
the same
It's,
meeting.
So Cheryl and I had a long conversation about this today. There's a lot of work to do around looking holistically at the classes we offer, at the schedule we offer, at do we want a block schedule, do we want trimesters, do we want to keep what we're doing?
Grad requirements.
What are the grad requirements? And to do one of those things without the other things it doesn't make a lot of sense. But we will be having a committee of some kind to look at this holistically. I anticipate a 1 to 2 year process to totally look at it, but looking at all of those pieces and saying, if we want ethnic studies, where does that fit? What are we doing with math? What are we doing with our 7-period, like, all those things have to kind of come together to have a plan that best serves kids and gives our high school students the most options, prepares them for college, gives them, exploration we want, everything all kind of simultaneously. So it's coming.
Okay. And dual enrollment
Uh,
was part of that conversation.
uh-huh. Yeah.
What is that?
There are some issues with dual enrollment, but yes.
I figured there were issues.
That's
Are
why I
there
made that
not
horse noise.
All right.
issues with something?
Current community college enrollment where you get credit at the
Right.
same time, but
Which
that
we-
requires the community college
To
partner.
Right.
It is very difficult, not just for us.
If there's nothing
No,
else,
I'm
we
done.
will adjourn until next time.